This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney. Is Michael Barr back?
I think he is.
Michael Barr, we think, is back. There's been a sighting, a Barr sighting, if you will. Lisa Mateo with us as well. All of us back together again after Mr. Barr's sojourn and travels. We'll hear about that as he travels out to the left coast. Good morning to all of you in the YouTube world. On Apple, Android, commuting, on Apple CarPlay, I should say. Android Auto, good morning as well. Good morning, 99.1 FM, Washington. Great job by Nathan Hager this morning.
He's the best.
He's really on top of it.
Yeah,
Bloomberg Daybreak and Bloomberg News Now. I really got to say something. Top of the show. When do they do it? Like every hour?
Every hour, I think. It's
updated.
A whole digital thing.
Apple,
I don't know what's going on.
Apple Podcast and YouTube Podcast. It's really breaking out. You're going to hear a lot more about Bloomberg News Now in the coming months. It's an immediate success, to say the least. Fed Day Wednesday, so what?
Yep. I'm thinking 25 or 50 basis points. I don't know.
Could have 75.
I'll go
together.
There. Why not? We
have a wonderful guest to start us off, Veronica Clark. We'll get to her in a moment on the Fed soiree. Apple in the news off a bit, 222 down to 217, on worries about selling enough phones and all that, a whole bunch of other stories as well. Let's get right to it. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it, and good morning. This morning, futures. Well, we have a mix of red and green on the screen. Traders are waiting word from the Fed on how aggressive policymakers will be on cutting interest rates. So right now, we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.2%, 40 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 86 points. And we have S&P futures little changed, up about a point. The 2-year yield at 3.56%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.64%, and that is little changed. We have spot gold higher, $2,580 an ounce. Brent crude, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. Companies making news. Boeing, it's actually at risk of being cut to junk. Moody's ratings, it placed the plane maker on review for a downgrade. The latest worker strike really hurting production. Cash flow shares up, though, about 0.2%. Now, meanwhile, Air Canada, they avoided a strike, reaching that tentative agreement for that new 4-year contract with its pilots union. And those shares are up about 1% right now. And DirecTV customers will get Monday Night Football back. Walt Disney, the owner of ABC, ESPN, they reached that new contract with the company. DirecTV agreeing to pay market-based rates to carry the channels. We have Disney up 0.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
What does that mean?
I have no idea. I was just going to call Lisa out. I have no idea what market-based. I mean, it's not my market.
Is this like face-saving stuff?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well,
it's Monday Night Football. You have to.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Okay, so here's the story. This is the oddest Fed meeting other than crisis I've ever seen. Things were normal till Wednesday. The world turned upside down Thursday, Friday, where there was basically an even weight idea. Should we cut by a measured 25 basis points or get the ship going with 50? Citigroup has been excellent on this. There's no other way to put it. Veronica Clark joins us right now. Let's start with a why. Why did the world turn upside down Thursday and Friday?
Yeah, I mean, this is another, news-driven pricing of 50. We saw this a couple years ago, of course, when we were expecting maybe a 75 basis point hike. Similarly driven by news stories, not necessarily so much in the data, but I think there is definitely the argument in the labor market data you can make for going 50.
Do they see that at the Eccles building, or is this just media forensics?
This feels,
we got nothing better to do than Boston College law student.
This feels a little, media frenzy driven, and we'll never really know if this is, the Fed trying to communicate with us. Maybe former Fed officials are the ones, trying to communicate with us. But yeah, you can make the argument, of course, I think for going 50. Of course, we did have those stronger inflation data points last week, maybe causing the hawks a bit of to be a bit uncomfortable. So right now, thinking they just do 25, but we'll see retail sales tomorrow. This is a very close call, of course.
So how do you guys at Citi view this U.S. economy here? Is it are we in decent shape, or a lot of folks will just say, hey, if you look at the recent trends are on the downside.
Yeah.
And so you have to maybe adjust for that. How do you guys think about the US
yeah,
economy?
I mean, the trend is certainly not comforting, especially what we're seeing in the labor market. I think it's well established now that hiring has really pulled back. That's really the where the weakness is coming from, which is okay if this is just a normalization. But the longer that lasts, you're risking this not just being a normalization, a correction. You're risking getting to that last final stage, which is layoffs, which you're almost too late at that point.
So, I mean, again, I think we're going to hear some retail sales coming up tomorrow. How do you think the U.S. consumer is hanging in there these days?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of signs of a weakening consumer that would be concerning as soon as you start to see things like job loss. Savings rates are very low. Delinquencies on credit cards, auto loans, those have risen. They're well above pre-pandemic levels. So as soon as something really does break the labor market, you would think that you're getting this big pullback in spending. Something like retail sales, though, it's not necessarily going to be the best leading indicator. It will tell you if you're in the recession, not necessarily if you're going into it.
Tom, I'm going to call out Torsten Slok, Tom, over the
Please.
weekend out with a nice email with citing some B of A data. Wage growth is improving across all income groups, with lower income households still outpacing other cohorts.
Yeah.
And then also calling for August 24 deposits remain more than 33% above 2019 levels. So it feels like on the margin, the consumer's kind of hanging in there a little bit in terms of wages.
I think the stock of household balance sheets is probably pretty healthy. People refinance mortgages at very low rates, but that doesn't mean that you can't get the incremental pullback for a couple quarters, which is what a recession would be.
Okay, I'm looking at the Taylor rule. We have the advantage, folks. TAYL for those of you with a terminal in your car, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plugins, including NAIRU, that's a fancy economic phrase.
Wow.
And also the neutral real rate, which if I lift it up from 2%, I guess I can get in there. Based on the Andrew Hollenor's Veronica Clark Taylor rule, how far away is this Fed from some form of fancy equation?
Yeah, I think pretty restrictive here. I think we're pretty far from neutral. I mean, maybe a nominal neutral is a bit higher than it was pre-pandemic, maybe something around 3%, 3.5%. But I think by most people's standards, that we're pretty far.
So let's sum this up across meetings. Let me go to FOMC. Go, folks. We can do this on the Bloomberg terminal. I'm flying this weekend. I spent the whole weekend. Mike Bloomberg did a primer 20 years ago. 20 terminal functions you need to know.
Yep.
I reread it today. Okay, September 18th, way too much focus. November 7th, December 18th. I really don't care if it's 25, 25, 25, or 50, 25 what, or 25, 50 what. At the end of the year, have we caught up to the Taylor rule?
Probably not quite. You're still pretty far from neutral, and I think that's the issue for the Fed. If they're only cutting 25 basis points a meeting, even if you're cutting
25 is not going to get it done.
You're not going to get to neutral for a year.
25.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think it does make sense to do a bit of front loading here. You got to go a bit faster.
So when you pull it all back here, what's the city call on GDP here? Do we ever get dangerously close to kind of little to no growth?
Yeah, we actually still have that recession in our base case, so a couple quarters of pullback. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it really does come down to the labor market story. Once you see that turning, which this is kind of the inflection point historically where things really do start to turn, you would expect that people are spending less, investing less for at least a couple quarters.
So what can they do if the Fed decides Wednesday?
Right.
What is the optionality that they have besides a rate cut?
Yeah, I mean, I think the
press conference.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see retail sales tomorrow, and that will probably be the final determinant. But I think the easier thing that makes more sense right now is maybe to do a bit more. You obviously need to be dovish if you're only doing 25.
Thank you for getting us started.
Yeah,
Veronica Clark. Andrew won't get out of bed this early. Really.
No.
He's already up.
He's already up. Veronica Clark, thank you so much with Citigroup.
Thank you.
So and your call, 25 or 50?
We are 25, but we'll see tomorrow.
25, we'll see. Just to get on the record there. We have audio tape rolling on Veronica Clark, 25 beeps.
Citigroup, yep.
Like I said, I really don't care, Paul. It's a dialogue.
Get me where I need to go.
Exactly.
Over time.
Well said.
Yep.
Get me exactly where I need you to. It's Michael what?
I think I don't know.
What's his last name?
What happened to Detroit?
Michael.
I forget.
Michael.
Yeah, I haven't seen him forever. The guy's just been slouching off.
Okay. He's back with our news in New York City. Much missed, Michael Barr.
Oh, you kind people. Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The FBI says Donald Trump was the target of what appears to be an attempted assassination at his golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida. The former president says he's safe and well, and authorities are holding a man in custody, 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ralph. We get more with Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries.
Well, what we've heard from Secret Service and the police there in West Palm Beach was that, the president, former president, was out on the golf course. They sent, per security measures, they had a Secret Service agent going one hole ahead of him on the golf course. That agent or those agents spotted a rifle getting poked through a fence on the perimeter of the golf course. They quickly started firing in that direction. The person who was there seemed to drop the weapon and run, and they captured a 58-year-old man named Ryan Routh on the highway a little bit north of West Palm Beach.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. Federal officials say Routh has 8 arrests on his record, apparently for minor offenses. In addition to an AK-47 style rifle, the Secret Service says it also retrieved 2 backpacks and a GoPro camera. It is the second attempt on Trump's life in just 9 weeks. A 3-judge federal appeals court panel will hear challenges from TikTok and a group of content creators to a U.S. law which would give the platform's China-based parent company ByteDance until January 19th to sell it or face a ban in the U.S. And finally, another member of the Jackson 5 has died. Tito Jackson was one of the 5 brothers that also included Jackie, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael. The family group produced several #1 hits in the 1970s, including I Want You Back, ABC, and I'll Be There. Tito Jackson was 70. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr with us back from the West Coast. We had your report from some bar off Union Square. I don't know where it was. You know, Jets. What's the difference there between Meadowlands and East Coast stadiums and what you saw with the 49ers?
Well, when you go to Levi Stadium, you can gain 50 pounds instantly because that place it's. I have not been to the stadium that modern, that popular, with great food like that. I'm not knocking the Meadowlands now, but I mean, man, you can walk in there.
They're just doing it totally different out there. People say the same thing, Paul, about the San Diego Padres.
Yep.
I mean, it's like a different sport and a different, entertainment thing as well. Just because we're here, let's catch up on it. Lions lost. I watched like 5 minutes of Commanders Giants. Was that professional football?
Well, wait. See, now I'm going to give the Giants a pass. I know, soft Michael, but here's why. For only the second time in the history of the National Football League, a team has scored 3 touchdowns, did not give up a touchdown to the opposing team, and still lost.
Because of those field goals.
Yep.
Kicked 7 of them.
But that's a new strategy. 7 field goals.
Well, and if you're the Giants, you lost your kicker on the opening play of the game.
Yeah.
Because he blew out a hammy or something like that. So they had some, I don't know who was trying to kick field goals. And then they did the 2 points. So it was just
we got through this
silliness.
First section without talking about the New England Patriots.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Yes, we did.
We'll do more on that later. Fed, Patriots. Fed, Jets. Good morning. That's the strategy. Red and green on the screen, the VIX 17.08. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by IBKR. With Interactive Brokers Forecast Trader, you can trade your views on key economic and climate indicators. Visit ibkr.com/forecast and get started today. All right, futures, red and green on the screen. Inflation trend suggests the central bank will cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years this week. But before that decision is announced on Wednesday afternoon, today we're going to get a read on manufacturing. Tomorrow it's all about retail sales, industrial production, and then Wednesday morning it's housing starts and building permits. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 56 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 87 points. S&P futures little change, down about a point. The two-year yield at 3.56%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.64%, and that is little change. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, up about 0.5% at 140.10 against the dollar. We have the euro, British pound stronger, Bitcoin down more than 1.5% at about 58,000. Stocks on the move, that would be Intel. Their shares up more than 1%. Now, sources say it qualified for $3.5 billion in federal grants to make semiconductors for the Pentagon. And then you have shares of Trump Media and Technology, that's DJT. They're up about 1.5% after that apparent second assassination attempt on the former president. And news from UniCredit. It started a £1.7 billion share buyback, delivering on the biggest payout pledge among European banks. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Can't say enough about Bloomberg News Now. Lisa just mentioned it. It's amazing. Who's doing this? Nathan Hager,
Karen Moscow.
Karen Moscow.
Amy Mars.
Oh,
Amy
that's smart
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
The good ones.
like real
the pros.
people, real journalists.
Yep.
And I really can't say enough about it, folks. It's very much patterned off the success NPR's had with more general news. This will be Bloomberg's News Now view of the world, where the prism that we have, and I really can't say enough about it. It's become addictive to get these 1 hour, every hour podcast comes through. Quick listen. How long is it, Lisa? It's like
Under 5 minutes, you can get news about everything.
No, Nathan's people said he can't do 5
He can't.
minutes. It's like, I think it's like he can devote 3 minutes to it. That's
Okay.
about it.
He's kind of
Bloomberg News Now.
he's busy.
George Calvas here. We just talked to Veronica Clark of Citigroup on the economics of the Fed meeting. Now the market reaction. Mr. Goncalves, head of U.S. Macro, MUFG, of course, of Tokyo. George, the currency market is screaming. I got weaker DXY. I got the Bloomberg Dollar Index through to new weakness. I got a 139 strong yen. 140 is not 139. I got a stronger yen right now, 140.13. If we get 50 basis points, what will the bond market do?
Hey, good morning, Tom, and everyone else. I mean, look, the market's screaming for a 50 bip cut. The macro markets are signaling at that, and we're in that view, as you know. I think we're one of the few houses, if not two, that still maintain the 50 bips makes the most sense. It's not fully priced into the bond market. We can still see a minor rally on it. It just really, at that point, comes down to the communication, the dots, and all the other sort of information we get at the meeting. But we think 50 makes sense, and the markets should still rally. I mean, all markets will.
George, in the fixed income space here, how do you want to play this? If we have a Fed that's going to be cutting rates, what's the fixed income strategy?
Look, the thing is, the bond market has been clued into this for quite some time. So the strategy has been working, which has been the curve steepener, continuing to buying dips in the short-term rates. Like that's really been what's working. I mean, nothing's going to be in a straight line, but we do think that locking in as much yield as possible makes the most sense. And really tips, real rates are attractive, and that's something that investors should look into.
So, George, do I take credit risk here, or do I just kind of hang out with my 3.5% on the 10-year, on the 2-year?
Well, I mean, look, as we know, I mean, it comes down to total return, not just the overall yield. And if the Fed continues to cut, we're going to have this kind of tug of war that, the 2-year is like nearly 200 basis points under where the Fed is starting from. So there's really, more of a catch up from the Fed than anything else. We do think that if the Fed is cutting this aggressively, they're trying to get ahead of any sort of economic weakness that still is coming down the road. And so that should be a negative for credit, all else equal.
So in your world, and maybe it's away from George Goncalves' skills, but if we get over 3 Fed meetings and all of a sudden it's January 12th and Lisa Mateo has a CD due, do you just assume there's going to be a lot of regret and remorse in January over what short rates have done for savers?
I mean, if there's any regret, is the lack of locking in rates ahead of time. I think, look, we can't obviously predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We do know a lot's already priced in. That is a challenge that this faces, the market participants. But I still think that the Fed is cutting. At least if they do cut 50, it's for the right reasons. They want to get ahead of this labor market cooling. And if they get it right, maybe they'll stop at some point, and then you do get it back up in rates. But until we get proof of that, until we get a new administration, there's a lot of uncertainty that's still out there. Trying to kind of time this thing is really not the right way of doing it.
On Monday, Paul and I go to single digit. We do none of this George Congalvis 3-digit idiocy. Paul, 2 years. This is off the BTMM screen of Bloomberg. 3.6% 2-year, 3.4% 3-year. 3.4% 5-year, 3.5% out, I think it's 7 years. I can't do the math. But those numbers are a lot lower than that 5% money market. Lisa's got like 5.2% at Costco.
Just clipping coupons.
Costco credit.
Clipping coupons. George, what do we do here on emerging markets? I know you've got some experience there in emerging markets. I mean, is this something that, the average investor should be thinking about in a declining rate environment?
I mean, look, if we're trying to soft land and, really most of the issues remain with the developed markets, less so the emerging markets, the challenge really comes down to, picking in the strong sectors within the emerging markets. They've proven to do better in this cycle, all else equal. So I do think that EM has a space in people's portfolio, especially relative to where yields are starting from in DM space.
So on this dollar here, Tom's been calling out, the weakness we've seen in the U.S. dollar here. I mean, how do you guys think about that at MUFG? I mean, I know you guys have a global view here. What's your view of kind of the U.S. dollar and just kind of where maybe some value is in currencies?
I mean, look, most central banks are now cutting. The Fed is one of the last ones. The BOJ is at least attempting to maybe hike again. We shall see. But the Fed's really doing a lot of the work now. If the Fed starts to cut more aggressively, then other central banks won't have to do it as much. So I think that that's really going to become this kind of like resynchronizing of central bank policy.
Let's get out to Thursday. Do you fault the Fed for this conundrum, or is just media hysteria because the Red Sox are playing 500 ball?
I think you cannot lay too much blame at the Fed. They're really catching up at this point. They should have cut in July. They know that. They're behind the curve. They want to get back in front of it, and they're going to front load.
And you're predicting 50 beeps.
We're in the 50 bip camp. Yes, we haven't changed.
Brockton, can we get somebody who thinks they're going to cut 75 beeps? It's a little slow on a Monday. Brockton will see what he can do with it. George Congalvis, thank you so much. MUFJ, I don't have any strong opinion. Paul, I hate the parlor game. The betting of this. But to me, the real story is where are we the first week of January? It is 3 meetings. There's an election in the middle of it. And they can talk all they want, and Powell's voice changes when they ask him about the politics of the moment. You can hear his voice change. But
I mean, you have a Fed Reserve, Tom, that's going to be, presumably cutting rates right smack in the teeth of a presidential election.
November 5.
That's not where they want to be.
2 days. I think they have a Fed meeting 1 day after the election.
Okay. All right. Let's hope for calm in our nation's capital. But exactly. So we have a Fed that's presumably in the cutting mode in the face of an election. So what does that mean for the politics of it all?
We'll have to see. Let's do a data check, folks. Let's go right through it now. On oil, a little bit up, but still, it's a shock to see American oil, West Texas Intermediate, $69.13, $70 a barrel. Brent crude squeezes down, $3 spread. Global oil, 72.02. Gold. Look at the statistic on gold. Wow. Good morning, Dennis Gartman. Gold and euro, gold and yen, just doing better than good. No other way to put that. BitDog, 59,000. Had to do that for Matt Miller. Matt Miller came in today.
He did. It's just an atrocious shirt he's wearing today.
This shirt, it's like a Christmas shirt gone bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
2-year yield, 3.56%. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning, 99.1 FM Washington, 92.9 FM Boston. Thanks to the comments across New England. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Wall Street has its eyes on the Fed this week. Policymakers getting ready to kick off a two-day meeting on interest rates tomorrow with a decision on Wednesday. Now, the big question on whether the Fed will go for a 25 or 50 basis point cut. So right now we have futures mixed. NASDAQ futures down about 0.3%, 74 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 103 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 2 points. We have the two-year yield 3.56%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.64%, and that is little changed. We have spot gold higher, $2,581 an ounce. Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. Companies making news, BMW. Shares in Germany down about 0.5%. The company took more than 2 years to figure out the extent of that braking system issue. It may cost it about $1 billion to fix. And TikTok is headed to court today. It's an effort to derail a U.S. law forcing a sale by its parent company, ByteDance. And Apple goes before a UK tribunal. It's accused of unfair competition in App Store pricing. But meanwhile, analysts are saying that based on the first weekend of pre-orders, demand for the iPhone 16 Pro series lower than expected. Shares are down about 2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I'll have to see on that. I did see one note. I honestly can't remember who, but it basically said what the cell phone companies are doing, T-Mobile, Verizon, and it's the same idiocy as before.
Okay.
They'll do whatever they can to lock you into monthly fees and keep you as a customer
I'll be
and
joining
all
them.
that. Without further ado, in a different conversation than we would have had Friday, Henrietta Treyz joins with Veda Partners. Henrietta, America's violent. We all know that, whatever our political persuasions. Are our candidates going to really have to start limiting their exposure after this second assassination attempt?
You know, it's an interesting question. The Secret Service has talked for a while now about how the golf courses in particular and former President Trump's time on the golf courses poses a unique problem to them. I would say that members on Capitol Hill and the task force associated with the first assassination attempt are going to explore that pretty robustly. I mean, they've been concerned about these outdoor rallies and then also golf courses. I'm not aware of any other areas that are a major concern for them, but those are two, and that's obviously what happened yesterday.
Are we benumbed to the chaos? I mean, you know, the headline gunfire at Trump Golf Club, latest jolt in chaotic 2024 race. Henrietta, is this America numb in this odd election campaign?
I think at this point, it's not wrong to say that. I would just, point to the market and point to the reaction that we have not seen from markets in the way that we saw back in the early part of this summer when there was sort of an explosive response to the first assassination attempt. So I do think there is a bit of numbing. Obviously, no one was harmed in this case, thankfully. So it's very different, a stark contrast to the first one. And I would maybe point out that the problem we have here, the sort of very discomforting piece for me, is we're going to have data to back up where people feel this attempt was resonating from. Was it from a lone gunman? Was it from, members of one political party or another? We're going to have data that contrasts yesterday to earlier this summer. And that's going to be a really stark comp that I wish I didn't have to look at.
Henrietta, is there any way, or I guess the question is, how will both campaigns deal with this latest piece of news, do you think?
Well, I guess I'd back out just a little bit and say what investors should expect and what pollsters should be looking at or what we're going to get. The next data set is going to be the lag of data from the debate. So what I published for clients last night was that Harris has seen a pretty momentous rise in the polls. She was at, +1, +2, +3. Now she's in +4 to +6 range. And that doesn't even include the state specific data. So the next round of information we're going to receive should be very positive for Kamala Harris. And that's going to be really confusing because we just got this starkly negative data point against former President Trump with the attempted assassination. So there's going to be this very discordant release of data from polls that's obviously lagging and giving us last Tuesday's debate versus what has just happened. So I think it's probably going to be superseded rather quickly. And then we won't see anything from President Trump's uptake, if there is any in the polls, until next week. I guess if you wanted to see it quicker than that, look at fundraising data and Republican voter registration data. That's probably the best we're going to get.
So, Henrietta, what's the schedule for the coming week for both of these candidates here? Are they campaigning hard, and are they focusing just on these, 6 or 7 swing states?
Right. We're pretty much camped out in the swing states: Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The candidates are fanning out and going to different locales to the extent possible. The next big event we have isn't until October 1st with the vice presidential debate.
Yeah.
As you know, there have been no agreements on a second presidential debate. So we're really just wearing down the clock to October 1st.
I got the calendar up. Paul was warbling gaily, folks, and I was looking at the famed Bloomberg calendar. Tomorrow, folks, September 17th, it is 2 weeks to Lafayette College and CBS in a vice presidential debate. Henrietta, you got to sell me on this. Do I really have to stay up past surveillance bedtime for a vice presidential debate?
No, I don't think you do. And I know you wake up early. So definitely you do not, unless you want to see it. What's interesting about this one is that it is the most popular candidate on the trail, Tim Walz, who has an approval rating that is above water at plus 3.5%, versus the most unpopular candidate on the ballot this year, which is J.D. Vance, who's at negative 10.5% nationally. So you're going to have a pretty stark contrast. What I saw from the first presidential debate between Harris and Trump was that a lot of viewers, several million, tens of millions of viewers saw their information afterwards the next day. And so there's sort of a lag time in terms of how voters are receiving this information, particularly under the age of 45. So I think you can afford to go to sleep. You'll see the highlights the next day without question.
You bring that up. How's the youth vote? Look, this came up this weekend. What are young Latinos going to do? Young blacks, young this, young that. Are they going to show up?
Yeah, it really does look that way. Voter registration is through the roof. It was through the roof at about 184% for uptake from Black women following the DNC, 143% from Latino women following the DNC. And then in the wake of Taylor Swift's endorsement, you saw over 700,000 people in 24 hours go to vote.org to try to register. Those are principally youth voters. 400 some odd thousand of those were just from Taylor Swift's link alone. Wow. So, I would say there's going to be a pretty material uptick or a robust turnout from the youth demographic. And those would be your silent voters this year, because those people are not going to be on voter polls that are being called by pollsters.
So, Paul, if Mott the Hoople endorsed somebody, will it have a big effect?
I don't think it's going to have a big effect there. Henrietta, can you, Vice President Harris, should she be doing media? Should she be doing a town hall? Should she be putting herself out there for the media and answering questions? She has not done much to date.
Yeah, I think that what the debate showed is that not only did voters have reticence to vote for her because they didn't know about her policy positions. I want to say it was something like 24% of voters said they wanted to learn more about her positions. And then you had the debate where obviously both candidates had an opportunity to talk about their positions, and voters responded very positively to what they heard. So if the Harris campaign is looking for a reason to either go into the media or not, the debate suggests that voters not only want the information, but were enthusiastic about what they heard. That's why Harris's numbers have widened against Trump. Her polling has risen into the 50 to 51% range, while Trump's has declined. So she serves as a contrast, and they like what they see.
So what are you doing this week? I mean, we got all this stuff swirling around. What's Henrietta Treyz's date calendar, things to do in this election this Monday and Tuesday?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to Fenway on Thursday.
Nice.
I can't wait. And I'll be traveling up and down the East Coast this week, starting tomorrow in Philly, and then New York, and then Boston. And I am going to go to Fenway, and I'm thrilled.
Look at that, Tom.
Look at that.
I know.
mean,
Player.
Can we get Henrietta the morning after she's at Fenway?
I'll get her when she's
she slides over across the turnpike to the Cask and Flagon. Brockton, I know Brockton shut the Cask and Flagon down one night.
All right, very good.
She's going to be over there, under the Citgo sign.
Yep.
I can just see her.
Yep.
What a trooper. I don't even know who they're playing.
No.
I mean, they're done, right?
They're done.
Phillies won 90 games. So I want to see, Ken Rosenthal tell me, is 90 the new 103 games?
Yep.
It's really impressive.
Should be at Fenway.
Henrietta Treyz, we need to talk to you the day after you go to Fenway. Very important. Veda Partners. Henrietta Treyz, seriously there, folks, on the shock in this nation, the embarrassment in this nation of our violence. We'll have much more on that. Look to Balance of Power, 12 noon. Joe Matthew, Kaylee Lines for more on this. Red and green on the screen, the VIX 17.12, the dollar weaker. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Former President Donald Trump is safe after his Secret Service detail opened fire at a man who was wielding an assault rifle at his West Palm Beach, Florida golf course Sunday in what the FBI called an apparent assassination attempt. A statement from Vice President Harris says that she is thankful Mr. Trump is safe. The suspect is in custody. Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw reports this will raise questions once again about Secret Service protection for the former president.
This guy seemed to have gotten within 500, 600 yards of the president, maybe a little closer, snuck onto the golf course somehow. So I do think that is yet another sign that the perimeter and some of the broader precautions may need to yet again be tightened. You're already seeing some questions being raised by some of Trump's Republican allies about what exactly was being done differently to protect him. Obviously, there's a new director of the Secret Service in an acting role right now, and there's going to be a lot of questions ahead of that.
Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw, as this is the second attempt on Trump's life in 9 weeks. Meanwhile, the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, says he believes the threats of violence against schools in his city are directly connected to the baseless claims that Haitian migrants were stealing pets and eating them. Springfield Mayor Nasser Nelms.
Parents are coming to get their kids because they feel worried. They feel like their kids are unsafe here.
Mayor Nelms says 2 local universities are closing their campuses with classes going remote. The schools say they received emails making the threats of a bomb and a potential shooting at the campuses. At least one of those emails targeting Haitians in the community. Venezuela has arrested 3 Americans on suspicion of plotting to destabilize the country, accusing them of potential violent actions, claiming they are CIA agents. The department denies any U.S. government involvement in a plot to overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro, who has claimed victory in July's presidential elections that most observers say he lost by a wide margin. Global News 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Do you think former President Trump, going after Taylor Swift was at 1 point differential with Kansas City Bengals? I mean, do you think it made a difference?
I would go with more of a shaky pass interference call that set the whole thing up.
Did they get special treatment? I mean, I don't know anything, folks. Full disclosure. Come on. Are they getting special treatment?
That was a shaky call. And I can't blame, Mr. Burrow for right. He was mad, and I can't blame him.
It's
tough
like
to
the
go against
Montreal
Mr. Mahoney.
Canadiens 30 years, 40 years ago.
He's doing great.
Everybody says they're getting preferential treatment.
Yeah, look, they're a great team, don't get me wrong, but I've seen some calls that's like, hey now. I know as a Detroit Lions fan, I know we see it the other way, but, it's...
Bengals the best 0-2 team in the NFL? Yeah, pretty close.
Do you think they clear the runway at Kansas City International Airport when she sits up I think she flies to Salt, I can't remember.
Yeah,
but she flies in and, it's a celebration.
Yeah, of course.
All that, okay.
I didn't know she was so
We're
tall.
doing everything we can to avoid Michael Barr's rotisserie league.
Yep.
How you doing?
We don't. Are we short on time right now?
We're short on time.
We have Damien Sassar.
Well, so Damien Sassar is scheduled to be with us, and we'll pick up the pieces. We said good morning to all of you on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. We are humbled by the growth there, the rapidity of the growth. Rapidity is a word, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely going with it.
YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Apple CarPlay in your commute. Android Auto in your commute. Watch YouTube in the office. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures mix as the Fed gets set to reverse its rate hiking cycle this week. But will policymakers go for that 0.25% or 0.5% reduction in interest rates? We're going to find out their decision on Wednesday. So we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.3%, 68 points. Dow futures up about 0.2%, 103 points. S&P futures little change, down about 2 points. The 2-year yield at 3.55%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.64%. And that is little changed. We have the dollar weaker, the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down nearly 2% at around 58,000. Companies making news, Nippon Steel, an Italian financial news agency, is reporting the company may be interested in buying that troubled Italian steel plant formerly known as Ilva. We have Nippon Steel up about 0.1% in Japan. And Target, they say they plan to hire about 100,000 additional seasonal team members across its stores and supply chain facilities. Target up about 0.3%. And finally, that cup of coffee could cost you more. Rise in supply disruptions really pushing the cost for premium Arabica beans up to the highest in 13 years. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. You're going to work with Lisa here in a moment on the newspapers. Paul, I want to go to Lucas Shaw's brilliant essay overnight featuring Disney. And I'm looking here at Shogun, 18 wins. I know that, everybody knows I was out front on this. I've read the book. I've read the book cover to cover twice. I've read Noble House, blah, blah, blah. The whole thing. I'm a big fan. And the bottom line is, but did anybody make money?
I don't know.
And you're looking at this triumph, Paul. And where did Disney close on Friday?
No, it's just not. It's the stock's kind of up just a little bit year to date.
Oh, come on,
but
the 10-year track record.
Absolutely flat year to date.
Iger would be thrown out the door.
Yep.
It's trading where it was in 2014-ish, 10 years ago.
Yep.
So what are we doing? We're just doing this for ego?
I think we are. I mean, it's how do you make money in this new world has been the issue for these media companies in the last 3-4 years, and nobody has any idea how.
If you're part of Global Wall Street, it's real simple. Power on Mark Gurman.
Yep.
On Apple. And I can't remember Lucas' thing.
Shaw's thing, but he's got his thing.
Lucas Shaw's thing. Screen time? Thank you, Lisa.
Time, thank you.
Screen time. Just subscribe to them. It'll explain really the madness of Paul Sweeney's world.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Good morning across the nation. Good morning to all of you in commute. The daily look at the front page is the Lisa Mateo moment. It's brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their portfolio analysts consolidate, analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analysts. Do that at ibkr.com/free PA. ibkr.com/free PA. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. This one stood out to me on the Washington Post. You've heard about children's savings account programs, more of them popping up in disadvantaged school districts. They pointed out the Bradbury Heights Elementary School over in Maryland is a Title I school. So parents went to, the back to school night. They were told that their kids will be eligible for at least $13,000 to cover the cost of college, vocational training, build up their wealth once they graduated, any one of those things. So it's kids from the classes of 2037, 2038. $1,000 each year from kindergarten through senior year of high school if they stay in the school system and graduate. So the parents are really happy. They say it's going to give their kids this kind of jump start in life. So I thought it was a really, really good story because you're seeing this more often nowadays.
Where does that money come from?
This one's the Greater Washington Community Foundation. They have this Brilliant Futures program, so they get the funding for it. And then it goes into, it started back in June, this particular program, and now they have about 400 students that are in it.
I'm seeing a new sense of desperation. I mean, across rich people in the middle. There's a whole new sense of this is just insane.
Well, I mean, the cost of higher education is crazy, and it's called into. I mean, some of these, you go into the trades. That is for a lot of people a way better opportunity than kind of pursuing that college track.
Good morning, listening in the evening of Australia where they get it right. They're just all they do. You go to school, you get out, and they take a teensweeny amount of your paycheck forever. I don't know the details. Uwe Reinhardt, the giant at Princeton, once told me that.
Okay.
Australia gets it right. America doesn't. Next.
More states are requiring students at publicly funded colleges to complete a civics course. So they get it in high school. They're saying they want
Wendy
it to
Schiller
be
made
in
you do this?
No, she did not. This is the Associated Press. Here's the thing. So studies showed that a third of American adults, they can't name the 3 branches of the federal government.
No.
There's another study that shows 10% of college graduates thinks that TV's Judge Judy is on the Supreme Court. So this goes to show you where it's going. So now you have these colleges that want to do it. So they spoke with this professor at University of South Carolina, Beaufort. He said that he gives out the citizenship test to his students, and 35% of them will pass it. So it just goes to show you that this is the reasoning behind why more publicly funded colleges want to bring back civics to the curriculum.
Yeah, all right.
As Jeff Sachs said years ago in his seminal book on the Dumbing Down America, great book, he said, we're now at the point where the kids are dumb, the parents are dumb, even the grandparents are dumb. I mean, we are so far from civics of our youth is to be, like if I said right now to 100 people, who's Andrew Johnson? They'd have no clue. I mean, first president impeached, coming off of Lincoln and all that. Richard Haas has the book on this, folks. I'm not going to mince words. The Bill of Obligations. Read it, throw it at a child, hit him on the head. The smart mouth college. Not that there's any smart mouth college kids at Lisa's house.
No,
but
not at all.
The Bill of Obligations. What do you got next?
I got to talk about Shogun. Okay, so
thank you.
You talked about it. I mean, I know you love the show. Top Emmy, first time in 19 years. So they did. They got 4 awards at the Emmys. But here's the thing. It set this record for the most wins by a single show in the year. 18 if you include the Primetime Emmys and then the Creative Arts Awards.
Wow.
So it really got all these. And they also
Tom was
won
early on
for
this.
The Bear. Yeah. Yep. So Disney's out in front, beat out Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery for the most Emmys. So it just goes to show you.
I would love for Lucas at his wonderful panel coming up in LA when they talk to Shogun people. Were they advantaged by having a pandemic? Because the pandemic slowed down the production. They wrote the original screenplay, which was touchy-feely, woke American. And they said, this ain't working. It doesn't sound like Japanese. And they took the production to Japan and literally had Japanese do the screenplay in Japanese and translate it back to English with rewrites.
Interesting.
But I wonder if it would have been as successful without the delay of the pandemic to give them time to get it right.
Yeah, all right.
Very cool. I can't say enough about it, folks. All of the actors, the stars, just wow. What do you got? Anything?
Yeah, so you talk about the younger generation and corporate life and what their views are.
She's doing this to get us.
Well, this one you're gonna like. It says that Gen Zers are actually bragging about how happy they are about their jobs in corporate world. This is the oldest members of Gen Z are like 27, so this gives you kind of an idea. Right. But younger workers previously, they talked about people should quit their corporate jobs. But on Gen Z, they're posting on social media. They like the structure. They're appreciative of the jobs. You have these people that are called corporate girlies. So they post their...
What's a corporate girl? Are you a corporate girlie?
They post their outfits.
Outfit of the day.
Outfit of the day
I do
that they wear
all
to
the
work.
time. Out on LinkedIn.
Bow tie of the day. You got to do it. But they just say they're happy. So they're kind of changing that narrative a little bit, whereas the younger generation was pushing to not go corporate. They're pushing that it's all about corporate.
Well, here's the stat in this story. Gen Z, Tom, has overtaken baby boomers in the workforce this year, with 21 million of them employed full-time in the U.S. How about that? So we're yet again a minority here.
I don't know. It's great. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for making us feel so ancient.
You're welcome.
Lisa Mateo there with the newspapers this morning. I mean, you look at the upward. Did you see the tweet? I hate Taylor Swift.
No, I missed that.
You think it's the former president?
Oh,
just put out a I hate Taylor Swift. Okay. That's un-American.
That's un-American.
I hate Taylor Swift.
I'm not going to die on that hill.
What are you going to do? Taylor, Kansas City won. Good morning.
you're looking for has been here the whole time. If you could see that I'm the one who understands, you've been here all along, so why can't you see? You belong with me. You belong with me.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. In the last hour, the former president of the New York Federal Reserve System, he was in Singapore last week. Bill Dudley says, quote, the logic supporting a 0.5 percentage point, 50 basis point cut, quote, is compelling. That from Bill Dudley, and we'll have much more analysis of that through the morning as well. Paul, this is front and center. Started on Thursday. I have never seen, short of a legitimate financial crisis, this tension between 25 and 50 beeps. George Congalvis agrees with Bill Dudley.
Exactly right. And we're going to have some coverage on that Wednesday, Tom, I believe. We got you guys are going to be there at 1:30. I believe.
Is it really?
I think that's how it's happening. Then we got
we
got the meeting at 2:00. We got Mr. Taking a look at this Federal Reserve and what it's going to mean here. So we got 25 or 50 basis points. That's the question.
In the market this morning, we got red and green on a screen and a churn of VIX 17.13. Foreign exchange on a move with critically a 139 strong yen print. Damian Sassower to join us in a moment from the Interactive Broker Studios. Here's our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got a mixed look before the bell. Traders are waiting word from the Fed how aggressive policymakers will be on cutting interest rates. NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, 75 points. We have S&P futures, little change, down about 3 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 108 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.54%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.63%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,582 an ounce. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. Stocks on the move. Intel shares up nearly 1%. Sources say it qualified for $3.5 billion in federal grants to make semiconductors for the Pentagon. And then shares of Trump Media and Technology, ticker DJT, up more than 1%. And after that apparent second assassination attempt of the former president. And finally, news from UniCredit. It started a £1.7 billion share buyback, delivering on the biggest payout pledge among European banks. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by Cohn Resnick. Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover game-changing strategies to maximize value, optimize performance, and manage risk. Put your business at the forefront. Do that with Cohn Resnick. We thank them for foundational support this morning. Damian Sassower joins us now. Oh, excuse me. We're going to go to Nathan Hager first. My fault. Nathan Hager with us right now from Washington on a day after what I'm going to call an invisible assassination attempt. Nathan, what a stark contrast from the terror that we saw in Pennsylvania. What does Monday morning look like for Washington and for the Secret Service?
Yeah, certainly it is a contrast, Tom, when we saw the former president wounded back in July in Butler, Pennsylvania, blood dripping from his ear. This morning, we have seen the Secret Service credited with an attempt that didn't go nearly that far. The Secret Service apparently spotted this suspect something like 500 or 600 yards away from the former president at his golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida. They spotted him with an assault rifle, what they're now calling an AK-47 style assault rifle, in a tree line. He ran away, was later arrested in a adjoining county, I think it was Martin County, along Interstate 95. Later found a backpack and a GoPro camera.
Okay, but Nathan, just to get to the chase, the president's on the golf course. Do we have any reporting that he was like on the third hole and this guy was set up on the X hole, the fifth or sixth hole, waiting for the president to walk by?
I don't think that we have anything to that specificity at this point, but there are a lot of questions, to your point, about how the Secret Service could have allowed someone to get that close once again to the president after the incident in Butler. We've heard from members of Congress, this bipartisan task force that's already looking into this first assassination attempt, asking those very questions. The head of the House Republican Conference saying, how could this person get so close to the president? We're waiting to hear more about what the potential motivation could be. There have been sources telling multiple media outlets his name is Ryan Routh, and actually the Associated Press just reported that they actually filmed him in Kiev more than 2 years ago, trying to recruit people to fight in the war against Russia. So as those details continue to come in, as we learn more about this situation, we're going to find out a lot more, I think, about what the potential impact could be on the presidential race.
Nathan Hager, thank you so much. We're in between his reporting on Bloomberg News Now. Look for that. It's a terrific podcast. Even Damian Sassower is tuned into Bloomberg News now. Joining us from EM. Damian, I'm just going to cut to the choice. Bill Dudley, I believe Chair Powell favors an aggressive approach. If we get a 50 beep cut, what does Malaysia do?
Well, I think right now the markets are telling you what Malaysia is going to do. EM currencies are up across the board here, and I have to say it took me a little bit of time, but I'm also in the 50 bip camp now too. And the reason is I think it's just. I think it's just easier to err for the Fed to err on the dovish side than the hawkish side at this point. I just think that's where we are. I mean, if they go 25 and the market perceives that as hawkish, the market's going to sell off. It's going to be bad for growth, bad for the economy, bad for corporates. But that's just me, and I'm kind of in Bill Dudley's camp now. I think go 50, go big, and then see where the market is. But free lunches are hard to find, Tom, and so those countries like Malaysia, the Malaysian ringgit. I mean, that's a funding
Malaysian
currency. What? It's the ringgit, RINGGIT, the currency of Malaysia. It's a low-yielding economy, Paul, and the reality is all these low-yielders, many of which are in Asia, are rallying in the face of a 50-bip cut by the Fed potentially, and so I think the markets are telling you everything you need to know here.
Emerging market policymakers are turning increasingly dovish as 11 of the 18 central banks we track, that be Damian tracks, have cut their target rates in 2024. Is the U.S. behind the rest of the world?
It is, and it extends to the developed markets. You took the words right out of my mouth. If you include developed markets, half of all of the 27 major emerging and developed markets, central banks have eased policy over the last 2 months. We saw the ECB in Peru last week. We're going to see the U.S. this week. I don't think we're going to see nor just BOE, Indonesia, or the BOJ, certainly not. But I mean, as we look to September 20th, I think that's the key central bank meeting, is the BOJ. I think the propensity to hike is there. The markets, I think, are underpricing that, and I think there are ways to play that in the market, in currencies and in rates.
Can we back up?
Yeah.
And I get the China dynamic.
Yeah.
But when you write your world-renowned newsletter, 10 a.m. it comes out, whenever it comes out, do you look at it as global recession, global slowdown, global lethargy?
So it usually comes out at 6:30 a.m., Paul. At 10 a.m., I mean, I'm long gone. But I mean, Paul knows this. Here's the deal. The commodity prices. Commodity prices have confirmed the growth slowdown in my mind, right? I mean, you look at energy prices. I mean, although copper's really snapped back, you look at iron ore prices down, 15, 16% year to date. But really for me, I think it's telling you everything you need to know. It's certainly a supply issue on the oil side. And I certainly think you're going to see gasoline prices here in the U.S. decline over the next few months off the back of all this stuff we're seeing in the energy sector. But, whether or not that's going to really continue to keep consumption high in the U.S., keep retail sales high, it remains to be seen with what we're seeing on the labor side. And so, I think, the Fed may well go 50 bips here.
Paul, moments ago, the 2-year yield under a 3.55, 3.5426.
Nice.
That's down to new weakness on the 2-year yield.
All right, Lisa, mortgage rates have to be following soon.
They
Just
are.
Stay
They tick
tuned.
down.
Stay
They
tuned.
tick down.
Mortgage rates got to be coming down.
They're down 12% from a peak off the series I use.
China. What are we doing in China?
We're not paying attention to China. I mean, look, China's
Really?
slowing.
Really?
No, I mean,
Why?
everybody's revised their growth forecast lower. Citigroup, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, everything is revised lower to 4.6 to 4.8% year-over-year range for full year 2024. But really what we need to look at is this is the first time, Tom, in 2.5 years that Red Bull isn't in the lead in the constructor standings.
Thank you.
Shout out to Zach Brown and the McLaren team. They have unseated the
was
beast.
outstanding.
It is competitive again. You have
Yes.
Piastri. You have Lando Norris now.
Right.
You got to look at the Drivers' Cup. There's some real things happening in F1.
And they did, folks, I can't say enough how F1 has come back to what the excitement of the Netflix movie. I watched every moment of Azerbaijan, and I looked it up on a map. I sort of
Baku.
know where it is, like Caspian Sea and all that, but
Where did they
I
race?
can't say
Southern
enough
Corridor,
about
oil, pipelines, all that fun
what
stuff.
they're doing constructively in F1. Michael Barr's in the room. His rotisserie's in the tank. How you doing?
Yeah, mine is not so great. I got to concede. I mean, listen to this one. I just give you a stat.
Please.
11 of the 15 games this last weekend were decided by less than a touchdown. Tight matches and huge upsets. San Francisco, Baltimore, Detroit, the Rams, and
Okay.
Dallas, all losers
One
on the
more
weekend.
question. We're 2 games in. Are the Giants the worst team in the NFL?
I can't say that. I'm a New Yorker. They're not very good. The Commanders aren't a very good team, and to lose to that team is not
Okay.
great. Jets won,
Thank
though.
you. I don't
Happy
care
days. All's
I don't
right in the
care
world.
EM. I just want to know, where we are with Damien's rotisserie league. Red and green on the screen. He feels better with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Former President Donald Trump is safe after his Secret Service detail opened fire at a man who was wielding an assault rifle at his West Palm Beach, Florida golf course Sunday in what the FBI called an apparent assassination attempt. A suspect is in custody, identified by federal officials as 58-year-old Ryan Ralph. The incident would mark the second attempt on the Republican presidential candidate's life in 2 months. Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick reports it's not clear if this latest apparent attempt will have an impact on the race.
Look back to the July assassination attempt. It was barely more than a week later before President Biden announced that he would be stepping aside as the Democratic nominee, and very quickly the campaign events and the focus of the campaigns shifted, and it's been such an unpredictable campaign, a chaotic campaign with so many events to keep track of, that any individual event, even a major one, including another assassination attempt on a former president, it's hard to say exactly how that will stick in the minds of voters, if it motivates people or persuades people.
Bloomberg's Jack Fitzpatrick. A 3-judge federal appeals court panel will hear challenges from TikTok and a group of content creators to a U.S. law which would give the platform's China-based parent company ByteDance until January 19th to sell it or face a ban in the U.S. FX's Shogun won for Best Drama at the 2024 Emmy Awards, as The Best in TV was honored last night, aired on ABC. As for Outstanding Comedy,
the award goes to, the Emmy goes to Hacks.
Hacks star Jean Smart also won Best Comedy Actress. Jeremy Allen White won the Emmy for lead actor in a comedy series for his work in The Bear. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Paul, market's really here on the move. Ian Lincoln was out pushing for 50 beeps. Everybody's published this morning. We'll give you a compendium of it, folks. But I think it's like I've never seen, other than like financial crisis. I mean, things are really
paying attention to
moving here. I got the Dow up, NASDAQ. There's some Apple angles. Small caps seem to be lifting a little bit here in the future. Small caps up 0.6%. But look at the bond market. I mean, they got new lows on 2-year yield. The real yield 1.54 is the handle in 2 basis points. I mean, things are moving.
Things are moving. The bond market's telling you that this Fed is going to go. It's going to maybe go a little bit bigger. I mean,
I
you
would
get
say
Damien
the tilt is,
Sassower. Yeah, Damien Sassower, he's joining the camp for a 50 basis point cut here. I'm not sure if the data is there, but I mean, I guess you can make an argument for it. So this Federal Reserve, it's going to be interesting that the press conference, Michael McKee down there in D.C. However the Fed goes to kind of defend where they are.
And this goes back ancient time, folks. This phrase ex post, after the fact. All central banks wait for the data. And that's really how they got in this conundrum. They're just waiting for the data. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts nationwide. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures mixed as inflation suggests the central bank is going to cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years this week. But before that, as decisions announced on Wednesday afternoon, we're going to get a read on manufacturing. That comes out about 15 minutes from now. Tomorrow, it's about retail sales, industrial production, and then Wednesday morning, housing starts and building permits. So we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.5%, 81 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 92 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 2 points. We have the two-year yield, 3.54%, down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.63%, and that's down 1 basis point. Over to currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen up 0.7%, 139.87 against the dollar. Euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down nearly 1.5% at around 58,000. Companies making news, that would be Boeing. Moody's Ratings placing the company on review for a downgrade as its latest worker strike really hurting production and also cash flow. Shares, though, are little changed. Meanwhile, Air Canada, they avoided a strike. They reached a tentative agreement with its pilots union. It's going to include a 42% compensation increase over the 4-year deal. Shares up nearly 1%. And yes, DirecTV customers are getting their Monday Night Football back. Walt Disney, the owner of ABC, ESPN, they reached that new contract with the company Disney, up about 0.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Good morning across the nation as you begin your commute. And we're going to give you a brief here on what's happened, the directional happened in the last 3 hours. The answer is on Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. Good morning, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130, our flagship in New York City. Good morning, 92.9 FM in Boston. Yeah. 50 beeps is in the wind. William Dudley writing for Bloomberg Opinion, the former New York Fed president. Let's go 50 beeps. Ian Lingen, let's go 50 beeps. George Concalves, let's go 50 beeps. The 2-year yield moments ago to new lows, 3.5447, as Lisa mentioned. Strong yen solidly through 140, 139.92. Following this, Greg Dacko joins us now, chief economist at EY Parthenon as well. What is the signal from strong yen, 150, 160, now down at a 139 handle? What does that signal to you?
Well, I think generally speaking, what we're seeing in the FX markets is that there is likely to be more easing on the Fed's behalf, and that's leading to a weaker dollar across the board. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Fed does. There's, as you were highlighting all morning, a lot of debate around whether the Fed will go 25 basis points or 50 basis points. I think what's perhaps more important is what the destination is for monetary policy. Where is the Fed headed in its effort to neutralize the effect of monetary policy on the economy? And what will be the journey? That's really much more important for the economy at this stage than whether the Fed goes 25 basis points or 50 basis points.
When the Fed does begin cutting rates, presumably this week, how do you think they'll proceed? Will it be a kind of a linear fashion, 25 basis points every meeting, every other meeting, or are they front-loaded, as maybe some people are suggesting in the last couple of days? How do you think they're going to proceed?
Well, I think they're likely to signal that they want to ease monetary policy by more, certainly, than they were back in June, where they only were expecting one rate cut over the course of 2024.
Yep.
I would argue that they should actually front-load some of the rate cuts, as I've been saying for a while now.
Okay.
I think the Fed should have started to ease monetary policy back earlier this summer, June, maybe July, and it did not do so, erring on the side of caution and preferring to wait until the data or data points actually indicated the need for easing of monetary policy.
You have a prism at EY like nobody else. It's just a different view from a traditional audit and consulting firm. Do you see an American slowdown right now when you look anecdotally client to client?
Yeah, I think what we have is a forward-looking perspective in terms of how the data is likely to evolve, because we speak with a lot of CEOs, a lot of CFOs, a lot of business executives, and they've been telling us for some time a few things. One, inflationary pressures are easing. That's why we've been in the camp of seeing inflation fall faster than what markets were pricing in. Two, we're seeing a labor market slow down, and we continue to see that. We're seeing business executives being very cautious with how they hire, who they hire, and how they proceed in terms of management of their workforce. And three, and this is very important, we're going to be in an environment where income momentum is slower than it's been. That's really the key element to focus on. It's not GDP, it's GDI. It's not consumer spending.
What's GDI?
GDI is gross domestic income.
Gross domestic income.
So it's the equivalent, essentially, of GDP, but in terms of income. Not the spending side, but the income side. Look at real disposable income, growing 1%. Consumer spending is growing at 2.5%. Where's that gap coming from? Savings.
Paul.
That's not less.
Let me translate this.
Please,
In April, on a macro exam, okay, they'll go, what's the difference between GDP and GDI? And that's when you know you're looking for a quality C.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what GDP, GDI is.
Gentleman's C.
Guys like
There's nothing wrong
Daco
with
can
that.
get it. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Nothing wrong with us gentleman C. So is the Fed, in fact, behind the curve here as it starts to move?
I think
and
the Fed,
what's the risk of that, maybe?
I think the Fed is behind the curve, and the real risk is that it needs to catch up. And so the signaling is much more important. Your question was, what is going to be the signal from the Fed? I think Fed Chair Powell has a very difficult task at hand. He has to signal that the Fed is ready to ease monetary policy, perhaps faster than what he was saying all along, and go back to his Jackson Hole speech, say that the two sides of the mandate are now in equilibrium in terms of risks, and that he is ready to ease monetary policy faster than would have been the case in normal conditions.
I got one final question. We got breaking news we got to go to. Greg Dacko, it's just as simple as this. If we get a lower rate regime within the ambiguity of it's bad or good for America, does it support GDP? Does it support American business to have a lower rate regime?
Well, I think we are likely to be in a higher rate regime because inflation is likely to be structurally higher than it's been in the past. So we're likely to be in a higher interest rate than we've been over the course of the last few decades. But what's important is to neutralize the effect of monetary policy so that we avoid a more pronounced slowdown than what we're starting to see. You don't want to be behind the curve during the entire game. You want to catch up and make sure that you have the appropriate set of monetary policy in order to guide the economy.
With EY Parthenon, Greg Daco was with us, chief economist as well. Ike Henning and Arnold Schultz moving the story forward on UniCredit Commerce Bank. This was widely anticipated, a smart Bloomberg article on what Deutsche Bank will do. Paul, to me, the headline here is their brilliant chart of total assets. Now, I would say Deutsche Bank is number 1 or number 2 in Europe. I would say I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, this chart is phenomenal. I mean,
BNP, Credit Agricole, Steve Stanley, Santander, Kitchuk, SocGen, then the merger if it was occurred, and then and only then Deutsche Bank. And Deutsche Bank, what do? Buy their German brethren like they tried to do in 2019?
Well, the reason I think UniCredit and Commerce Bank deal is so amazing to me is because the European bankers have been calling for cross-border M&A
since time began.
Since time began. I mean, you look at J.P. Morgan and Bank of America and all the deals.
I mean, David Harrow's been calling for it since Lombardi was coaching the Packers.
Exactly. So Deutsche Bank is exploring ways to make it harder for UniCredit to buy Commerce Bank as it considers how or whether to react to a potential deal that would create a huge competitor in its home market. And that's people with knowledge of the matter. So that's the Bloomberg reporting out this morning, Tom.
Positively British or American, I guess, is what it is. Thank you for that from our team in Frankfurt, Germany, and in Berlin and Munich as well. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 17.18 is up 0.6 at 2 points. I can't say enough about signals in the bottom. Yeah, there it is. We've got a 2-year yield, 3.54 down to a 3.53 handle. We're now in 4 basis points on the 2-year, 10-year yield, 3.63. And the real yield is the number one thing I look at. It's right on the bottom on support, 1.54. For that to break down would be a huge deal. We're not there yet, but certainly the rate market here on a Monday before a Fed meeting, modeling in some of the drama towards a 50 basis point cut. Nowhere, Paul, do I see it better than a wow statistic. Number one on my Bloomberg Launchpad, folks, equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, 139 handle on dollar yen.
Yep. All right. that is some serious strength for the Japanese yen here. And that just reflects, as you suggest, Tom, kind of a growing thinking out there that come Wednesday, the Fed might be a little bit more aggressive than we initially thought.
We'll have coverage for you through the next coming days. The Fed decides. We'll do that Wednesday afternoon. On Apple CarPlay, on your commute, on Android Auto, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Wall Street has its eyes on the Fed this week. Policymakers getting ready to kick off a two-day meeting on interest rates tomorrow with a decision announced on Wednesday. Now, the big question, whether the Fed will go for a 25 or 50 basis point cut. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, 89 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 99 points at 41,924. The S&P futures, little changed, down about 4 points at 5,686. The two-year yield, 3.54%. Down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.63%, and that's down 1 basis point. Commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,581 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. A few companies making news. That's BMW. Its shares down nearly 1% in Germany. The company took more than 2 years to figure out the extent of that braking system issue. It could cost it about $1 billion to fix. And TikTok headed to court today. It's an effort to derail a U.S. law forcing a sale by its parent company, ByteDance. And Apple, they're going before a UK tribunal. They're accused of unfair competition in App Store pricing. But the big news there, analysts are saying on that first weekend of pre-orders, demand for the iPhone 16 Pro series lower than expected. Now, shares were down about 2%. They're now down about 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Interesting to see. Anurag Rana, I believe, slotted in to be with us later, which is great. You know, Robert Schiffman published. Did you see the Schiffman like an hour ago?
No, I did not.
He's like said the debt on the Mag 7 is just like mint. I mean, with the cash flow they got coming in. They're over. They're done.
No.
They're finished.
They should put out some way more debt for those guys.
Economic indicators. This is when we do it. Quiet day today, but really important. Day after day. Thank you, Michael McKee, for driving that for us. Economic indicators, always brought by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. We like to get outside New York. Raleigh, North Carolina. Unemployment rate 3.3, 3.3. In April, 3.0, 3.1. Finally pops in June to 3.6. And in July was 3.8. Joining us with an outside New York perspective, Phil Newhart with First Citizens Bank. Are we going to get to a 4% unemployment rate in Raleigh and a 5% U.S. rate?
You know, I think in Raleigh, we're going to track the U.S. broadly. We're a pretty diversified economy. You'd expect us to track with the U.S., probably below it. 5% nationally, look, it's not that far above the long-term average, but that probably indicates we're entering recessionary type scenario. I mean, we really need to
we
top
turn
off.
into a pumpkin.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look historically, usually the unemployment rate starts rising, it keeps rising, right? We're at 4.2%. Yeah, the hope would be we level off at 4.5. There's not much precedent for that, which is why we need Fed relief, which is, of course, what we're all talking about this morning. Hopefully not 5%. That's not our base case unless you think we're headed towards recession.
So where are you and the good folks at First Citizens Wealth? What are you thinking about this Federal Reserve? How aggressive will they be? And what's the cadence for the Fed?
Yeah, I think they should go 50 basis points. I know Mr. Dudley moved markets this morning. We have felt that way for a little while. Really thought July should have been a live meeting. It was not. After that, I wouldn't be surprised to see quarter point moves if they go 50. If they start at quarter point, maybe then they are shifting higher. My question would be, is if you're going to go 50 in November, why would you not just do it September? Policy's too restrictive. We're probably 200 basis points into restrictive territory. You can do 50 and not communicate to the market panic, which seems to be the worry out there.
That's probably different from maybe just 3 or 4 weeks ago when the discussion of 50 would be, that's suggesting that there's something really wrong.
That's right. I think the labor market is the story here. Job openings have come down. Quits rate, we're seeing the pace of job gains come in. It's time for the Fed to act. And inflation, you've got PCE deflator in the mid-2s. It is time.
I mean, Paul, you mentioned this earlier. There's a small matter of before the Fed meeting, we get a report on retail sales, a bunch of other stuff too, but it's 70% of the economy. People in 3 zip codes in Manhattan really don't pay attention. When you do the work at First Citizens Bank about state of consumer, Are we as wrong about the gloom on the consumer as we've been for the last 3 quarters?
The story is there's 2 consumers, right? The lower end consumer, look at credit card delinquencies, subprime auto delinquencies. We are seeing a consumer that's squeezed. Higher end consumers doing great. Why is that? Wealth effect.
Right.
Your home values all-time high. Your stock values are probably near all-time high. So the higher end consumer is doing fine. We just have 2 consumers, and we're seeing that softness play out.
I want to give a shout out to all of you in your morning commute. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. And our quarter coverage at 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 11.30 New York, 92.9 FM in Boston. For Global Wall Street, William Dudley will join us at 9:15 this morning. He has moved the markets this morning. Bill Dudley, inventing Goldman Sachs economics a few years ago, the former Federal Reserve President of New York. Bill Dudley at 9:15 nationwide on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Phil, inflation. Is it been whipped? Is it under control? Can it come back? How do you guys view inflation these days?
Well, I think we're in a disinflationary environment,
okay.
meaning 2 to 3%. I'm not so sure 2.0 is the run rate. We're probably between 2 and 3 on PCE deflator. The issue has been shelter. We saw that in CPI last week. But the Fed, I'm not so sure they control that. One issue in shelter has been high rates. That has kept inventories really low, which has pushed up prices. So you could argue rates coming down, mortgage rates coming down, could actually loosen up that market. So I don't see a dramatic reacceleration, but the idea of sub 2 that we had last cycle, I think that's a thing of the past. We are now in a 2 to 3% inflation environment.
Okay, what's real GDP going to do? I mean, everybody, except for you, has been wrong. I got Atlanta GDP now. It's a snapshot right now. It's terrible. 2.47%. I mean, come on. We've been wrong.
Absolutely. This economy is unbelievably resilient. I think it's a reminder of the uniqueness of this cycle. Right? This is not a typical business cycle. It's very hard. We look back to 1991 and say, oh, there's an equivalent. There isn't. We had a shutdown economy, a reopened economy, huge supply and demand curve shifts, which drove prices higher, and the economy just continues to persist and strengthen. We do not have a recession in the next 12 months. I know some do. We think that the economy, while maybe growth slows, continues to grow.
If we have an ex-post central bank, we're going Duke economics now.
Let's do it.
They teach history. Rubenstein went mental and said, teach history. We're not ahistorical. We do history at Duke University. What labor parameters do we need for a Fed to get going and not be ex-post? 5% unemployment, 200x claims. Give us some of those numbers.
Yeah, I think we're there. Right. The direction of the unemployment rate, I think, has told us this story.
The vector's there. What is the history that a central bank works off vectors? I don't see it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, central banks are very backward looking and they often look at the level. I think the direction and alternative measures. Look at job openings. Look at the quit rate. Things are slowing. We are seeing demand slowing. Is that a deterioration in the labor market? No. Initial jobless claims are still low. Layoffs have not started. But the vector is there. It is time for the Fed to act. And look, they just can look at the differential of their rate versus the inflation rate, and it tells you the story.
Are there hawks at the Fed anymore? I don't even think so.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Not in a while.
Not in a while. I mean,
Tom, you go down to Duke University and you want good barbecue. You know where you go? Bullock's Barbecue, 1952, family owned, the best queue down there I think down in that area.
So what does a small business like Bullock's Barbecue doing here? I mean, you're telling me they can't get lower? I mean, their wages got to be flat to down because there's more people looking for work, right?
So the truth is small business optimism is much lower than what we're seeing S&P 500 optimism. What we're hearing from small businesses is they're getting squeezed, right? Rates being higher, they actually have to access debt capital markets. You do not see that for the Magnificent Seven, for example, or not, at least not necessary. They're dealing with wage inflation, they're dealing with input cost inflation. Especially places like healthcare, they still can't find workers. So we sense a lot more constrained optimism, more negativity from our mid and small sized businesses than the big boys.
Bullock's doesn't accept credit cards?
No, please.
Cash only.
Cash only.
Do students have cash?
That's a problem. That's an issue. They have to go find an ATM. They have to figure out what a PIN is. Maybe they'll do some Venmo. I don't know.
It's like Katz's on Houston Street. Same concept.
Yep. So that's how you roll down there. I mean, it's serious Q. I mean, you're going in there.
It just screams road trip, Paul.
It does.
I mean,
Come on
I'm
down.
sorry.
Exactly.
Take Michael Barr down there, and that's great. Phil, thank you.
Absolutely.
Phil,
Thank
look,
you.
this is really, really valuable. I'm looking at 2.47% Atlanta GDP. I get it. Bill Dudley's going to be with us here at 9:15. That's great. And everybody's, happy. And, I got a tape that says leans towards 50 beeps. There's no question about that. But I can understand Hawk saying, why don't we keep our optionality open, go 25 with a lot of optionality?
Yep.
I guess they can go
It's
emergency.
a good argument. I don't know which way to go.
I don't.
Wednesday's going to be fun. I'm going to tune into your coverage starting at 1:30 p.m. Wall Street time.
We're going to have that. We got guests lined up, and it's going to be good. Red and green on the screen, a VIX 17.08. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Former President Trump will be back on the campaign trail tomorrow, holding a town hall in Michigan following yesterday's incident at a Florida golf course where the FBI says he was the apparent target of an attempted assassination for the second time in 2 months. Mr. Trump says he's okay and authorities have a man in custody. Political figures from both sides of the aisle are expressing shock. President Biden and Vice President Harris releasing separate statements saying there is no place for violence in America. Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, saying he's glad Trump is safe. The Trump family also reacting. Eric Trump saying, my father is running out of lives. Tina Fordham, founder and geopolitical strategist at Fordham Global Foresight, says she does not see this thwarted attempt on Donald Trump's life making an impact on the race.
I'm an American who lives outside of my country, but what I observe is the frog boiling phenomenon, which is the normalization of these extreme events, which is why I say with some confidence that I don't expect a big sympathy factor, but I do expect higher tension and even more polarization as a result. Both of these shooters, and again, they're suspects, were, white middle-aged men whose social media trail suggests that they were disturbed, but it's the United States and they can get a gun.
Tina Fordham with Fordham Global Foresight. A new tropical threat heading into the Carolinas today as a potential tropical storm, Helene. Tropical storm warnings are expanded from South Carolina all the way to the Outer Banks. Some students in the Carolinas are learning remotely today, and other school districts are closed. Hacks and Shogun won big at this year's Emmy Awards last night. FX's The Bear took home awards, including for Best Lead Actor in a Comedy, if you want to call it that. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much. How TV ratings doing? Because now I got 14 ways. I got to spend $700 plus to watch.
I know.
I tried to watch something, and I got blocked on YouTube or whatever. I mean, I'm a loss. But is our ratings suffering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why you see very, very little new scripted dramas or comedies coming on broadcast networks. They're just not there. They're putting game shows and all this kind of silliness there, and the quality scripted dramas and comedies are going to the streaming services.
Yeah, but in sports, NFL says week one averages 21 million viewers per game.
Boom.
Even the Giants, I guess did well.
Yep.
But like if it's on Peacock or Amazon or this, I tried to watch Yankees Red Sox on Apple. Something.
I can do that.
And I turned it off.
I know. I
the
can
announcers,
do Apple.
I'm like, where's Joe Castiglione or, whoever.
Yeah. Just announced his retirement.
Joe announced his retirement. I'll talk about that later.
You want Michael Kay for your Yankees
Michael
TV.
Kay,
exactly.
That's
the best.
It's all there is.
Yeah. John Sterling coming back for Yankees radio for some of the series coming up.
I did not know that. That's a good and wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Red and green on the screen, a VIX 17.13. Critically, yields are in, lower yields. Bill Dudley in 30 minutes from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures mixed as the Fed gets set to reverse its rate hiking cycle this week. In the meantime, some more economic data out this morning. New York State factory activity unexpectedly expanded in September for the first time in nearly a year. The Empire State Business Conditions Index, it rose 16.2 points. That's 11.5 to 11.5. That's topping estimates as well as the prior. A measure of new orders, that jumped more than 17 points to 9.4. That's the highest since April 2023. So we have NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, 95 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 87 points. S&P futures up about 0.1% or 5 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.55%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.65%. And that is little changed. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen up about 0.3% at 140.41 against the dollar. The euro stronger, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 1.5% at around 58,000. Companies making news, we talked about it. Deutsche Bank sources say it's looking for ways to make it harder for Unicredit to buy Commerzbank. One option, buying part of or all of the German government's remaining 12% stake in Commerzbank. And then an Italian financial news agency reporting Nippon Steel may be interested in buying the troubled Italian steel plant formerly known as Ilva. Nippon Steel up about 0.1% in Japan. And yes, guacamole-making robots coming to Chipotle. It's called Autocado. It's being tested out in California. It can cut, core, peel avocados in 26 seconds. Workers then have to mash it by hand. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
That's
Tom and Paul.
Finally, this morning, news you can use.
AI coming to Chipotle. Okay.
Do you buy your avocados like they're like hard as a brick and let them?
Yes, you have to put them in a brown paper bag, let it
Can I ask you
get
a
ready and
question?
ripen.
Are they good for you?
Oh, they're delicious, yes.
I know they're
Healthy
delicious,
fats.
but are they good for
Healthy
you?
fats, yes, you need them in your diet.
Captain Crunch.
No, not Captain Crunch. Avocado toast.
Okay. Well, thank you. Lisa Mateo with news you can finally use. Bill Dudley with us within the half hour. Bloomberg Surveillance, always brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost, global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. This at ibkr.com/RIA. Paul, it's supposed to be a snooze Monday.
I know.
It's not.
It's not. And, one of the questions a lot of investors have, Tom, is do I stick with my MAG 7, 8, whatever the number is, or do I try to find some rotation out of that? David Bahnsen joins us. He's the CIO of the Bahnsen Group. For that at Morgan Stanley, UBS, all those kinds of things. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. David, what do we do here with this market? I've got a Fed that I think is going to begin cutting rates this week. I've got a pretty decent earnings outlook, I think. What do I do with my equity portfolio these days?
The problem you have is not what the Fed's going to do, because that's well known, and it's not about earnings, which are quite good, but known to be good. The problem is what you got to pay to get that. It's all valuation oriented. Earnings growth has been at the higher end of expectations for a couple of years, and again, I would argue if you get the very, very, very best case on the planet, earnings growth for next year, on top of what was great earnings growth in 23 and 24, then you're still paying well over 20 times for the S&P. And that's broken out with a basically about 16 times multiple for everything that isn't technology and 40 times for technology.
So how about 16 times for the non-tech? Am I okay with that? And if so, where do I go?
You're going to do better that way, in my opinion. And you have for the last couple months. 1 week, 1 day, those things I don't call a rotation. But this started around July 10th or so. We're now getting into the second half of September. You've had a massive rally in the defensives. Yeah, 4 of the 7 Mag 7 names are down in this period of time. And they certainly, technology, I think, is the 5th best performing sector. It hasn't contributed.
David, what are people doing? I mean, finally, we're seeing a crack in short-term space. I got a 2-year yield off the Dudley SA, 3.55%. Are people finally making the great cash move, or are they scared stiff?
Well, I don't think that we're seeing a lot of people act big either way. They're not running out, they're not running in, but we do see a rotation. And the question is how much of that is retail driven, how much is institutional. From a performance standpoint, the rotation's robust. From a flow standpoint, it usually plays catch up because investors are always looking in the rearview mirror.
Presidential election coming up in a matter of weeks, I'm told. What does that mean for you, for your clients? How do you kind of put that into the calculus of this whole thing?
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yes. And you're right. We are in the final 50 days. I'm going to write my kind of every 4-year white paper on it near the end of the month. Look, the Senate is a bigger issue because I think regardless of what happens, people can say whatever they want about the presidential election. It is a 50-50 race. The polls, the Electoral College, the just basis of where we are as a country politically, it's a coin flip on the presidential side. I think it's advantage Republicans on the Senate, but it's not a shoo-in. They're very likely going to lose almost every seat that they could have won, but they're probably going to win Montana, and they certainly will win West Virginia. That's going to be a 51-49 Senate. So the big market things that could come, when people are going to talk about something absurd like taxing unrealized capital gains, it's never going to happen.
Jessica Taylor, David, you're living in L.A., right?
I live here in New York, but also based in Newport Beach, California.
Yeah, okay, same thing.
I would
translated. He lives in Newport Beach, California. Shows up here once in a while. Jessica Taylor in a Cook Political Report, quote, as Montana Senate moves to lean Republican, GOP increasingly favored to win Senate majority. I get the whole political thing, and we're going to inject Fitzpatrick's going to be on with this, and Guro shows up when he can. It's going to be gridlock, right? It's just plain and simple. We're way underplaying this.
And gridlock has been the best thing for markets since Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan in the mid-1980s. It lasted through Clinton Gingrich, lasted through Boehner Obama, and very candidly, it's really what we've had through the more toxic years with Trump and then Biden.
So even if the Democrats win the Senate, when you see unrealized capital gains will be taxed,
they will not be
taxed.
taxed.
Do you just say gridlock?
Yes. That's right. And so you mean even if the Democrats win the White House?
Or if they win the Senate.
Well, they have the Senate now, but if they, even, by the way, yes, if the Democrats held the Senate 50-50, there's 1, 2, or 3 Democrat senators that are not going to go along with taxing unrealized gains as well.
I think this is way underplayed, Paul. This idea that, I get the focus. I don't want to diminish whatever your politics are, folks, but you got to look at the whole continuum, like a Greg Giroux kind of guy, Paul.
Yep, absolutely. So David, a lot of folks say, given some of this uncertainty that we've been talking about, go to quality. What does quality mean to you?
Well, we say go to quality regardless of the macro environment, but that's our kind of permanent belief about investing. And quality to me means cash flow. I mean, that's the only reason to ever be investing is a return to cash. And we think that these dividend-growing companies are the most reliable ways to do it.
Come on, nobody's listening. Give me a name.
Well, give me a sector, I'll give you a name.
Industrial.
Cummins has been a really good pick for us this year. CMI is the ticker, and there's a lot of angles to that. But I think the whole industrials theme, the cyclicals have not done well, Tom, the last couple months. The cyclicals, in my opinion, are going to benefit. At some point, they got to rebuild Ukraine. At some point, there's going to be more infrastructure in the U.S. At some point, there is a lot of onshoring going on.
This is like a Graham Dodd and Cottle thing. It's not like
Columbus,
Microsoft
Indiana.
madness. EBITDA's 8 cents, maybe 15 cents on the dollar. Net income's maybe a dime on the dollar. 75,000 people, Columbus, Ohio. How quaint.
I know.
Good morning.
Count Uberhart. This is a Count Uberhart.
It is. This is. I'll go there.
They make stuff.
They made 12.2% over the last decade per year.
Yeah.
Solid.
And so you own that with Microsoft, and that balances things out.
But we don't own Microsoft because we have to have conviction in it. We don't want to pay that kind of multiple, and we also think there's a really vicious cycle at play with Microsoft and NVIDIA. The argument from NVIDIA is apparently Microsoft is buying so much from them, and the argument from Microsoft is apparently they're ordering so much for NVIDIA. I don't see how you can have it both ways. At some point, those margins are coming down. At some point, that super cycle is going to end, and you're overpaying. So look, we've obviously not been getting those returns in the big, tech names, but we believe that it's worked quite well for us the last 3 years.
I mean, there's some That's a solid. I'm thinking about this Cummins here. I mean,
Okay. David, thank you. This was great. David Bonson, thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
This is one of the Bonson Group here in New York and L.A. He's seen Taylor Swift 4 times. You know, he's been on a tour. Saw her in Paris and all that. Taylor again. How do we get Taylor again?
Why not?
Taylor!
Tay.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Thank you for joining us on your commute this morning. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Thank you so much. Shout out to Westwood One. I had lunch conversation with Westwood One Friday. Sure. They were telling me all about how radio still commands the space that they see with their great work at Westwood One. Good morning, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130 New York. Our flagship. Should we play California Dreamin'? Like the weather.
Yeah,
Paul, the weather
phenomenal.
In the last, 10 days?
Yep.
It's been like California.
Exactly right.
I'm sitting there going, okay, when does this end?
We had a great beach weekend down at the Jersey Shore this weekend. Water's warm.
See dolphins?
Tons of dolphins. I mean, just out of control. And they're close in as well.
They come in close.
They do.
Like you worry about the
so
kids?
the surfers are out there getting bumped,
They're getting, the surfers are getting bumped.
Yep, it's good stuff.
You
They
don't
love
see,
it.
like orcas don't, the YouTube shorts, Lisa?
Yes.
The orcas come right into shore. They're not doing that.
No, this is New Jersey.
Okay,
They know better.
They know better than that. Red and green on the screen right now, the VIX 17.10 on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Here, it's really sophisticated strategy, folks. You commute, and when you get to the office, you turn on YouTube. That's it. Back of the envelope strategy. It's working. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
And we've got a mixed look before the bell. Traders kind of awaiting word from the Fed how aggressive policymakers will be on cutting interest rates. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.4%, 94 points. We have Dow futures up about 0.2%, 111 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 4 points. The 2-year yield, 3.55%, down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.64%, and that is little changed. We have spot gold higher, $2,583 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. Stocks on the move. Intel shares now up 2%. Sources say it qualified for $3.5 billion in federal grants to make chips for the Pentagon. And then shares of Trump Media and Technology, that's ticker DJT. It was up as much as 10%, now up more than 1%. But this is after that apparent second assassination attempt on the former president. And finally, Zillow up 3%. Got an upgrade from Wedbush to outperform outperformed from neutral, and then it also increased the price target of the stock to a street high. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. William Dudley will join us here in 12 minutes, the former president of the New York Fed. He has moved markets this morning with a piercing scream for a 50 basis point cut. On the equity markets, the ramifications of what the central bank will do. Lori Calvasina, RBC Capital Markets. Lori, if we get 50 beeps, what will stocks do?
Well, I think it depends, as always, Tom, when we have these events, when we have these meetings. You may do one thing right after you get the announcement. You may do an entirely different thing once you get to the press conference. So I think it depends on what the Fed ends up saying. I think investors are really focused on the idea of whether or not we're going to have that soft landing. Are we tipping into a recession? I am still in the camp, all due respect to those who have said otherwise, but I am still of the camp that a 50 basis point move does run the risk of spooking markets if we don't frame it properly.
So, Lori, whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points, it appears that the Fed is on a downward trajectory in rates. That's number one. Number two, earnings are pretty darn solid here.
Yeah.
Is it difficult not to be constructive on equities at this point?
I think at this point, it depends on your time horizon, Paul, is how I would put it. So I see some differences when I do my valuation modeling for 2025 versus 2024. 2024, I'll save you all the math, but I think that we're fully valued. I think we're already baking in a pretty good move lower in inflation and a pretty good move lower in 10-year yields and Fed rate cuts. So I can't really justify a higher number on the multiple and the earnings for this year. That being said, markets can run hot. Our model's not perfect. It's just a rough guide. I can, though, when I even have some really conservative modeling for next year, I can get you to 6,150, 6,200 or so for the S&P in 2025. So again, I think, I sort of feel like in the short term, we're kind of full. I keep using that word. Longer term, though, I can make a case for stock. So again, it really depends on your time horizon.
What's a rotation from the Magnificent 8, whatever it is, out to your Russell 2000? I'm going to say 1,000-point year-to-date difference. One's up 17%, the other's up 7%, whatever the numbers are. But the answer is, can you hedge that bet and maybe go short Mag 7, go long the Calvasina 2000?
Oh, look, I'm not someone who short bets, tend to sit well with in general. But I think the reality is that if you look at the earnings growth dynamics between the Mag 7 and the Russell 2000, something really exciting is happening, which is that if you look at the forecasts, you've got a ramp down, kind of a slowing, a deceleration in earnings growth expectations for the Mag 7 bucket. Still fantastic growth, but just not nearly as hot as it was. Basically, they had an earnings recession in 2022, a big fat recovery in 2023, and now they're kind of coming back to earth a little bit. If you look at Russell 2000, it had its earnings recession basically a year and a half later, and it's starting to come out of that earnings recession now if you look at the forecast data, and it's expected to really ramp up next year and actually have faster growth rates than the Mag 7. So I don't know if that's necessarily a cause, a case to be made for being short on the Mag 7, but it does certainly make the case for broadening out. Now, you have to have a lot of other things go right as well. Those earnings estimates for Russell 2000 are not going to come true if the economy has a hard landing. But I think just on the earnings data alone, you can make a case for rotation.
Mag 7, Russell 2000, Vaxcyte, FTAI Aviation, Insmed, ready? Sprouts Farmers Market.
Nice.
Ensign Group, Fabrinet. This name I know, Muller Industries.
So, Lori, are there some sectors here that are screening well for you guys at RBC?
So I would say sector decisions, it feels like they're really tough right now. I think it does depend on which part of the market cap spectrum you're looking at. If we're looking at financials, for example, they look good to me in large cap. We're still overweight there, but they actually look a lot more interesting to me down in small cap from a valuation perspective. So I would say that one's screening really well. By contrast, if I look at a sector like industrials, we're market weight that one, it looks it looks overvalued, frankly, in both large cap and small cap. But when I compare the multiples between small and large, I get a lot more excited about them in the small cap space. So I think it depends on how far market cap you're willing to go. And I think you can also, link it up with certain fundamental narratives as well.
Is Apple a growth stock, a value stock, or a value trap?
I'm going to punt that one, or I'm going to get a call from the compliance people later, just because we're not allowed to talk about individual stocks. But what I will tell you is...
Wait. Your compliance head is Halima Croft, right?
No. She's our rock star. She's our resident rock star, but not our compliance.
Lori, can you tell auditing at RBC the amount of food Halima Croft put down at the Pioneer Grill for breakfast? I mean, she had a full Wyoming. It was unbelievable. Check that Amex bill.
Halima Croft is multi-talented on many facets. I've worked with her for a number of years, so that does not surprise me at all. But, going back to the tech space, Tom, though, what I will tell you is the tech hardware and equipment group is one that does screen pretty good to us in the technology space. It's cheap. It's got upward earnings revision trends. Software, frankly, looks pretty good too, kind of neutral on valuation, positive on revisions. The semis are still problematic in the tech space. They're looking overvalued with negative revisions to us right now.
Single point, where's SPX a year from now? Right now, 5,600. Where are we a year from now?
So we haven't put out a target for next year, but the valuation modeling I mentioned to you, it can sort of get you to sort of 6,150, 6,200 by year end. I do have some other models that get you to a similar number at mid-year as well.
See, that's roaring 20s with Lori Calvasina.
Very good. Yep.
Lori Calvasina, thank you so much. RBC Capital Markets, greatly appreciate it. I think people's heads are spinning. They're in the market. They're in the big tech. They're like, okay, we've done okay. Everybody else is like, pretty miserable. Mm-hmm. And you got this whole Fed soiree going on as well. Heads are spinning this morning with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The FBI is doing a deep dive into the background of Ryan Routh, the suspect in custody after another attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump. A Secret Service agent spotted a gun at a West Palm Beach golf course while Mr. Trump was there. There's concern that the suspect had done surveillance of Trump and the golf course and may have visited there before. The Secret Service responded quickly and effectively, and Mr. Trump says he is fine. However, Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick reports the incident will add to scrutiny of the Secret Service.
It will prompt a response from Congress beyond the statements we've already seen from congressional leaders denouncing political violence. But it really goes to show how chaotic and unpredictable this campaign season has been, to say that it's really not clear what the effect will be of this major event.
Bloomberg government's Jack Fitzpatrick. TikTok and parent company ByteDance face a key court hearing today. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has the details from Washington.
President Biden signed a law in April giving ByteDance until mid-January to sell TikTok or face a ban in the U.S. But TikTok and ByteDance argue that law is unconstitutional. Lawmakers fear China can use the app to access data on Americans or spy on them, and they maintain the goal is not to ban TikTok, but challenge Chinese-based ownership of the app, which the White House once ended on national security grounds. The Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia is holding oral arguments today. 170 million Americans use the TikTok app. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Legislative, executive, and judicial. Surveys show that a third of American adults can't name the three branches of the federal government. One survey found that 10% of college graduates think TV's Judge Judy serves on the U.S. Supreme Court. Many people think it's time for a new push for civics instructions in college. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Michael Barr. Bill Dudley coming up in moments. This essay is so important, Paul, and it moved the markets globally. What might make the Fed not go 50? And Dr. Dudley clearly says, let's go 50. First, the expected destination for short-term interest rates matters much more than the pace of reductions. And this, Paul, goes to the vector question I was talking about, where a vector's in place, do they get out front of that trend? And Dudley's saying, do we know where the end result is?
Right.
That's the mystery for those more cautious than what we're hearing from Bill Dudley right now.
Right, and I think that the Fed wants to make sure that it has, in fact, conquered inflation here. So that's kind of a big thing. So again, 25 basis points or 50 basis points is what the Fed is presumably debating.
How many bills do you have that feel like a jump condition that didn't conquer inflation?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, we've seen the rate of inflation come down dramatically. Yep. car insurance.
Car insurance.
Absolutely, yeah. To me, and I think for a lot of Americans, it's just at the supermarket. That's kind of where you're like, wow, I know I didn't pay this much for this basket of goods several years ago. So we had that, that jump function in inflation during the pandemic. And they tell me that prices on a lot of that packaged goods stuff, they don't come down. Commodities come down. The gasoline, I got it under $3 a gallon this past weekend.
Right.
So commodity prices have come down, but not the packaged goods stuff.
Let's look at the litmus paper of the Bloomberg system. And of course, 2-year yield, I'm going to go to one digit just to keep it simple on a Monday. 3.6%, 10-year yield, 3.6%. 30-year bond, make it 4.0%. The real yield pretty much stasis now, 1.55. But really something when Bill Dudley came out and said he supports a 50 basis point move. Others as well. Before Dudley, there was a tendency in the morning. Ian Lingen, BMO Capital Markets, looking for that as well. But interesting moment at hand. Coming up, the former president of the New York Fed. Stay with us nationwide. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen as inflation trends suggest the central bank will cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years this week. NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 99 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 105 points. S&P futures little changed, down about 4 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.56%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.65%, and that is little change. We have spot gold higher, $2,585 an ounce. Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $70 a barrel. Meanwhile, shares of Boeing down 0.1%. Moody's Ratings placed the company on review for a downgrade due to the worker strike. And then you have Air Canada. They avoided that strike by reaching a tentative agreement with its pilots union. Shares up nearly 2% in Canada. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I'm going to go a little bit nerdy here right now as a precursor to get into Bill Dudley with this exceptionally important essay of the morning. And I'll be quick about this, folks. When we have Richard Clarida on, the former vice chairman of the Fed, there's a whole academics behind him that has a big fancy name that's called DSGE, Dynamic Stochastic General Equilibrium Theory. This is PhD work. A guy named Carl Walsh, who came out of the same Berkeley Combine as Bill Dudley, years ago wrote on the contracts, the agreements, the beliefs that a central bank has. Ben Bernanke said it was one of the 3 most important papers on how central banks think. Joining us now on how this central bank thinks, William Dudley, the former president of the New York Fed. Bill, we've shattered ex post, ex ante beliefs. How far behind is this central bank?
Well, hard to say with any precision, but I think it's pretty simple to say that the dual mandate objectives of inflation and employment now are pretty close in balance, yet monetary policy is still quite restrictive. Most people think that neutral is somewhere between 3 and 4% on the federal funds rate. So call us, 150 basis points away from where we should be.
If we have a vector of whatever it is, economic growth, disinflation, whatever we draw up in our minds, Peter Orszag would call it a glide path. Which is the glide path right now that matters to Bill Dudley that says this Fed's got to get up and go?
Well, I think the main issue is the fact that when the labor market tends to deteriorate, it either tends to deteriorate a little or a lot. So you don't want to go past that threshold where the labor market starts to feed on itself and continue to worsen. That's why you want to take out insurance now by going more rapidly rather than going gradually.
So, Bill, in your Bloomberg Opinion piece today, you note that the 2 objectives of the Fed's dual mandate, that is price stability and maximum sustainable employment, that they've come into much closer balance, suggesting that monetary policy should be neutral. But we're pretty far from neutral. So how do we get to neutral, and how quickly do we do that, Bill?
Well, I think the reason why the Federal Reserve is going to do 50 basis points this week is to get there more quickly. Now, the good news is a lot of easing's already priced in over the next year and a half. So the market's priced in 250 basis points by the end of 2025. So it's not absolutely critical that they do 50 versus 25 today, but doing 25 would have been awkward because it would have disappointed market expectations. They probably would have shown only another 50 basis points in their summary of economic projections. So the Fed would be essentially saying we're only going to do 75 basis points this year when the market was priced for about 120. So I think doing 50 brings the Fed more in alignment with the market, and it also fits the logic of the moment.
Bill, do you have a concern or a reasonable concern that by maybe going slower than they should, that inflation gets back, recession gets pulled back onto the table?
Well, I think there's a risk of that. I mean, every time the unemployment rate has risen by more than 0.5% on a 3-month moving average basis over a 12-month period in the United States, you've always had a recession. We've actually hit that trigger. Now, I don't think that trigger is a hard and fast rule that has to hold every time, but it does tell you that when the labor market deterioration goes on beyond a certain point, it tends to become self-reinforcing. The next, stop after a 0.5% increase is 1.9 percentage points in a full-blown recession. So that's the risk the Fed's taking by waiting.
Hey, if the Fed only goes 25 basis points, do you think we'll get a dissenting vote there?
I would think so at this point. I mean, I think what's essentially happened is the Fed changed expectations last week with those 2 articles that came out in the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times, sort of suspicious articles because they basically reopened the possibility of 50 when that was sort of getting closed off. Since that time, we haven't had any, Fed intervention in any way that's visible. So it seems at least that the Fed is comfortable with the shift in expectations away from 25 to 50. So I don't think, as time passes, I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to price more in the direction of 50.
Okay, I'm going to go nuts here. And, thanks. Marty emailed it. Marty, thank you so much for listening this morning.
On the 5th floor.
Bill, I'm sorry. We've got a shattered way of communicating. We have basically back X number of meetings a dissent-free Fed. I mean, love, peace, love, and dope. I get it. We are the world. We are committing Fed policy and discussion through a reporter at the Journal. Who's the reporter at the FT? I don't know. Smith? Oh, Colby Smith.
Colby Smith.
Yeah, Colby Smith. Okay. Come on, Bill. This is baloney. How did we get here? Do you blame Alan Greenspan? Lawrence Meyer, Washington University, St. Louis, would say it was a term at the Fed where Alan read everything. Is that where this started, Bill Dudley?
I'm not really sure why we've landed where we've landed. I agree with you. This is sort of awkward. You really shouldn't be communicating through these sort of articles in such a subtle way that some people get it and some people don't. That doesn't seem to be very fair for people to get the right signal from the Fed. I think what basically happened was the issue of 25 versus 50 was getting sort of closed off as you approached the blackout period. Powell didn't want it to be closed off because he was actually thinking pretty strongly about 50 basis points. And this was the way to keep it open. And I think what's happened is people have reflected on it a bit more. The logic for 50 has become very compelling to people. And that's why I think that's what the Fed's going to do at this meeting this week.
I want to make a distinction here. This is not an Alan Meltzer 50. I mean, we're not showing up at the discount window because the world's falling apart. Is this like an original 50 beep cut that we're getting because of pandemic mysteries, because of unknowns, or frankly, Dr. Dudley, because of too much information?
Well, I think they're just started a little late. I mean, a month ago or so, I said that they should have cut rates in July. So if they'd done 25 in July and 25 in September, they'd be in the same place. So I think it's a little bit because the labor market has weakened more quickly than they were anticipating. Remember, we had those very large downward revisions to payroll employment. And then the last 3 months in terms of the payroll gains is the lowest 3-month period since 2020. So there's been a distinct chilling of the labor market, and that's happened fairly rapidly. Now, the Fed is, reasonably comfortable that that's mostly due to the fact that the labor force is increasing, and that's what's pushing up the unemployment rate. But there are quite a few signs that the labor market's a little softer than it was, and I think that's what's maybe surprised the Fed how quickly that's come on.
Is there, just following up on that labor point, Bill, is there a level of the unemployment rate, I don't know, a headline number that would really get their attention? Or is this trend higher that you mentioned before, is that what's going to push this Fed forward?
Well, I think you're exactly right. The labor market holds the key here. So if the unemployment rate keeps drifting up, that will continue to motivate the Fed to go more quickly. Because at that point, the risk won't be balanced. The risk will be tilted to the downside on the labor market. So right now, think of the risk as balanced. We want to go to neutral. Labor market continues to deteriorate. Unemployment rate keeps going up. The Fed will then start to think, oh, we don't want to push policy to neutral. Right. we might want to push policy to easy.
Bill Dudley, you've got a key paragraph where you touch upon what, Vice Chairman Claret has talked about and many others. Thrilled folks, the Fed decides on Wednesday. I can't believe it'll be better than the last time we did it 6 weeks ago, but we'll try. And the answer is, Dr. Dudley, is the vectors in place of, let's say, disinflation for conversation. But are we getting back to 2.0? Do you simply discard what I'm going to call a John Taylor 2.0 banded endpoint? Is there a new endpoint that jumbles up all of our thinking?
I think the Fed thinks that they're going to get back to something close to 2%. I mean, if you look at the labor market right now, for example, labor job openings are at a level consistent with where we were in 2019, where inflation was actually below 2%. The other thing that's sort of should make you more confident that is what's been happening to wage inflation. That's come down below 4%. So I think the Fed is not like giving up and saying, oh, 2.5% inflation is good enough. I think they do think that we'll see further disinflation in the months ahead.
So, Bill, we look at the 2-year Treasury. I mean, just a cup of coffee ago, as Tom would say, it was at 5%. We're down to 3.55% on the 2-year Treasury. I mean, the market's already doing the hard work here, aren't they?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, financial conditions have eased a lot, even though the Federal Reserve hasn't yet cut rates. And that obviously makes monetary policy work more quickly than it has in the past. Right. But that said, low and moderate income households, are affected by the current level of short-term rates in terms of credit card debt, auto debt. So the current level of short-term rates still matters a bit.
One of the great moments of my career, folks, and I'm sure Dr. Dudley doesn't remember this, we were at some whatever, the coffee was expensive, and Bill Dudley was chowing down the croissants, as I remember. And we were talking about an America in the age of retirement, and Bill went mental, and full Goldman Sachs mental. And he said, Tom, some people have to retire at 60 because their bodies are broken. Bill, that was an indication of your work, your canonical work, which is there's two Americas out there. Are we committing monetary policy for the haves, the elite, the major financial system people that benefit from financialization? And this whole debate ignores an America essentially flat on their back?
Well, I actually think the primary motivation for the interest rates cuts is the deterioration for the low and moderate income workers. If you sort of think about the consumer spending reports we've gotten recently, it's all about stress at the low end, and I think that's what's motivating the Fed to cut rates more quickly. So I think they're definitely taking that into consideration.
Dr. Dudley, thank you so much. Bill Dudley, without question, the essay of the day at Moved Markets Worldwide. Look to Bloomberg Opinion. I'll get that out on Twitter and LinkedIn here any moment, but it'll be widely distributed today. Bill Dudley of Berkeley and, of course, of Goldman Sachs, a former president of the New York Federal Reserve System for Bloomberg Opinion. Paul, what do you think of that? Where are we going?
Well, I mean, I think that's, as Mr. Dudley suggested here, he believes, as do, I guess, a growing number just in the last several days, folks that say, hey, we need perhaps 50 basis point cut in this Fed to kick it off what will be presumably a lengthy easing cycle.
I just, I go back to an interview I had with Lawrence Meyer on his book, A Term at the Fed, and our communication system. Good morning to Richard Berner, ex-Morgan Stanley, who was definitive on this years ago. Our communication system is just bizarre. I don't know what else. I don't fault anybody. It's just bizarre. Moments ago, Dan Ives on Lisa Mateo's next iPhone. Every Apple iPhone cycle, the bears come out of the gates looking for mathematical gymnastics in pre-orders. As discussed with iPhone 16 AI upgrade, it'll kick off a massive super cycle. That from Dan Ives' firm bull thesis into 2025. Right now, with our Bloomberg Business Flash, here is Lisa Mateo.
You've got it. We're just moments away from the opening bell. Traders just awaiting word from the Fed how aggressive policymakers will be on cutting rates. I mean, we have some more economic data out this week to play into that. Retail sales, industrial production tomorrow. Housing starts, building permits on Wednesday morning. This morning we learned the New York State factory activity actually unexpectedly expanded in September for the first time in nearly a year. So how will things kick off to start the new trading week? We will get to that in just a moment. Right now, I want to check in with futures. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.4%, and NASDAQ futures, Dow futures up 0.3%.
It's the bell.
Let's get right to it. It's the bell as we start to get things going. And here we go, the S&P 500. Right now, little change, down 4 points, 5,621. We have the Dow up 0.4%, 159 points, 41,541. We have the NASDAQ down 0.6%, 112 points at 17,567. We'll head over to the 2-year yield, 3.56%, down 2 basis points. We have the yield on the 10-year, 3.64%, and that is little changed. Want to check in with commodities. We do have spot gold higher, $2,584 an ounce. Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $70 a barrel. At the open, let's check in with Intel. Their shares up about 0.6%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Thank you for that. Apple Computer down $6. I mean, let me look on a standard deviation basis. You do that with a famed trading envelope. It's outside 2 standard deviations. Okay. Plunges in order. Cratered is too much.
Too much.
But it's there. The pressure, the social pressure, folks. When you're buying an iPhone, you sit there, you're trying to save money, be reasonable.
Right.
But what would Anurag do?
What would Anurag do?
Okay, ready?
Yep.
I sprang for the 1 terabyte.
Wow.
iPhone 16 Pro, just so I can hang in the food court
with Anurag
Rana. Joining us now, Anurag Rana on short notice on Apple. Anurag, do you trust the Apple whisper industry out of the Pacific Rim?
There could be several reasons for this thing. I really don't know why people spend so much time looking at this thing. We already heard that Apple said to their suppliers that you should make more phones this year. It could be an oversupply at that point compared to what was it last year. I'm truly amazed at the level people go to try to track this on a day-to-day basis.
Where does the iPhone, this version here this year, where does it kind of stack up, Anurag, over the last several years and maybe the next coming the next year, the next 2 years? Where does this one kind of stack up?
Yeah, but Paul, going back to the long conversations all of us had on Friday, when you look at the 16 family of phones, it looks very much like the 15, which looks very much like the 14 at this point. And the big new one, according to Mark Gurman, is going to come next one, which is iPhone 17. Now, remember, iPhone or any other electronic product has a normal refresh cycle. That means after a certain number of years, it's just not going to work. You need, because of an old battery or storage or other issues, you will replace it. And that's really for Apple is somewhere around the 4-year mark. If you go back in FY21 and FY22, these guys sold a lot of phones that year. So we are hoping by FY25, where we are right now, we should get at least some bump because of it.
So how is Apple positioning this phone as it relates to AI? Because a lot of folks, I think, probably feel like perhaps Apple's a little bit behind the curve here.
So when you look at it, when you look at the iPhone 15 family of phones, there are only two phones that will be able to run any AI application on it. That would be the 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max. But the 16, all of the phones will run it. So when we see the newer applications come out over the next 12 months, you would need a new phone to run that. Now that would mean on-device AI or in the cloud. I mean, using OpenAI as inferencing. So the CD upgrade, that's what the event was all about. You're going to see that only on the 16. So that should help a little bit, along with that big refresh I was saying. So to be honest with you, I'm not looking at these things on a daily basis and then changing my opinion based on that.
What do you see, within the linkage of technology, the cloud, the utility scare, over to what the wireless phone companies are doing? I mean, we had one report, can't remember who, that the wireless companies are giving away the product like they always do. Do you see that same spirit of revenue production here in this cycle?
It's always been the case, and I don't see that the incentives are that much better than it was last year. Now, the carriers do make a lot of money on premium plans and other things, so they are not the really ones getting hurt in the long run because they do make money off of it. But it is easier for a consumer to go out and buy these things on a subsidized plan than to shell out $1,200 right up front.
And Paul, it's like 70-80% of people buy on a subsidized plan. Full disclosure, that's what I did.
That's what I did. They put me on a different plan, and they gave me like $1,000 or something.
Guy with long hair and a magenta T-shirt called me up and said, "Thank you, Tom."
Thank you very much. So, Anurag, put us into context, kind of where we are with the Apple story here. What's the narrative out there for this stock?
So when you look at Apple right now, I mean, it is the same thing, that it is a slow growing company compared to a few years ago. It's going to grow somewhere in that 6-7% next year. Earnings or EPS is going to be around the 8 to 10% mark. So but they're going to generate $110+ billion in cash flow, and they're going to buy about 24 to 25 billion every quarter. So that's really the story. All the free cash flow is going to go back and buy back shares, and that's really the slow and steady the way it's going to go.
Right. How's the cloud doing? What have you learned in the last 10 days, Anurag Rana, about the build out of the cloud? The major theme mere mortals see is they're going to have a huge electricity demand. Is that worsened, that worry? Has it worsened in the last 90 days?
I think there is a lot more discussion now about bottlenecks. One thing is really clear, that a lot of the cloud companies has bought these GPUs and are trying to create, ways for people to experiment or companies to experiment on it.
Right.
But, there could be, you just can't come up with a data center overnight. It takes time. Power generating plants take some time. I think that's going to be the big discussion over the next 12 months is what are the big supply challenges and how can we fulfill them?
Can I ask a question? I mean, if the Mateo house, or the house 3 houses down from the Mateo house, and they're there going, wait a minute, these guys need all that electricity. Should they be providing equity for further electric generation? Or do they look at it and say, this is a public service, the public has to, public utilities have to do it. The regulated utility industry has to do it. Why shouldn't Microsoft just build their own electricity?
I mean, I think a little bit of that may have to happen. And again, if the price goes out in terms of, if I have a solar panel on my house and, you want to buy it from that, I think that would be another area that we have seen, we are seeing an increase of that anyway throughout the U.S.
Anurag Rana, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. We got breaking news here. I got to go to it. Anurag Rana on short news. Apple, Paul. Apple was down 7, now down to 8. Yeah, there's not a bid on Apple yet. Critically, on this opening, Apple down 6, Apple down 7, Apple down $8 right now, $214. So from the recent peak, the end of August, $233 down to $214 on Apple. There's always surprise. And, Ian Shepherdson once said to me, he says, I'm not going to quit until Newcastle is top of the Premier League except for Man City.
Okay.
And so a bombshell moments ago, Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon just simply says, you know what? He's stepping aside. Newcastle football calls. He's going to do something with them. And Sam Toombs is taking over. And, it's getting to be the end of the year,
Is it?
It's
Okay.
like September.
Okay.
People are, they're getting out to November 15th. I mean, Lisa doesn't work after November 15th. So,
No.
they're wrapping up the year. And Ian Shepherdson, he's been a huge benefit to Bloomberg Surveillance and wonderful, brilliant U.S. economics, a whole franchise at Pantheon Macro of Chinese analysis as well. Ian Shepherdson to say it's enough for me after 34 years. We were going to try to get him on. I mean, I said, Eric, if we get Ian, we'll only talk Newcastle football. We don't have to talk economics since he's, moving away. Michael Barr's going, I have to talk about Newcastle football when I walk in. Dr. Dudley, thank you so much. I mean, that's what the show's about. Bill Dudley, Anurag Rana, back-to-back, Paul.
Yep.
It's pretty good. Good morning. Yeah, good morning on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, Building Every Day. On your commute, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, Good Morning 99.1 FM Washington. Our flagship station in New York, up the corridor, Bloomberg 1130 AM. And in Boston, thank you, over the weekend, lots of notes on 92.9 FM Boston. People are loving it. It's a big signal. You know where Mount Katahdin is? You're flying.
No, where's
You're
that?
flying from London.
Okay.
You go over
Oh,
Nova Scotia.
Yep.
And you sort of wave down at Millinocket out the right side of the cabinet.
All right.
92.9 FM from Millinocket down to Block Island. And they don't get it in the Hamptons.
No.
They get it in Block Island.
Yeah,
Difference
Block
there.
Island.
Good morning, 92.9. Dow up 200, NASDAQ hammered down 0.8% on Apple. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Biden says the U.S. Secret Service needs more help. The president spoke to reporters at the White House today. It comes after what the FBI described as an assassination attempt against the former president at Trump's golf course Sunday in Palm Beach, Florida. The suspect, 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh, was detained by Florida authorities in connection to the incident. Donald Trump is safe at his home in Mar-a-Lago this morning. Jason Russell, former Secret Service agent, says agents spotted the suspect before he could get his shot off.
I think you're going to find that there was some significant pre-attack surveillance that had been done, knowing that former President Trump regularly visited this golf course and that this would be a likely location where if you caught it at the right time, you might be able to make an attempt.
Former Secret Service agent Jason Russell. Meanwhile, the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, says he believes the threats of violence against schools in his city are directly connected to the baseless claims that Haitian migrants were stealing pets and eating them. Springfield Mayor Nasser Nelms.
Parents are coming to get their kids because they feel worried or they feel like their kids aren't safe here.
Mayor Nelms says 2 local universities are closing their campuses with classes going remote. The schools say they received emails making bomb threats of a bombing and a potential shooting of the campus. A new tropical threat heading to the Carolinas today as a potential tropical storm, Helene. Tropical storm warnings are expanded from South Carolina all the way to the Outer Banks. The storm could produce flash flooding with totals reaching as high as 8 inches of rain in parts of the Carolinas, along with a 1 to 3 foot storm surge. Mexico has officially reformed its constitution, now requiring all federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, to be elected. Critics say the reform will undermine the rule of law and damage the country's business climate. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. You got to go back to the Emmys here. I guess I'm I haven't even seen The Bear.
It's awesome.
I don't. Everybody says it's like
But it's
awesome.
funny. They put it in a comedy category, and it is probably one of the more darker dramas you're ever going to find. So I don't know what they're
there
doing
must be
there.
like 45 shows that were in consideration. As you know.
Yeah.
I'm speaking as a geezer. I've seen one episode of The Bear, and I wasn't laughing one bit. I thought it was, a serious drama. And then don't ask me about the rest of the other shows that won. I have no clue.
But the answer is one show, I would suggest deserved, but it was a complete, it was a generalization. It was a complete total focus on one show.
Yeah.
Is that what we've begun to?
I don't know. I mean, that happens in the past. You've had West Wing, or you've had certain shows that just dominate the awards because they're just that
Lisa,
good.
who should have won? I mean, you got another show you like?
For which one? For drama?
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I'm not a big drama fan.
Well, we sat in the kitchen.
I like comedies better.
I afterthought said Total Drama Island ought to be, serious contender here.
Yeah.
Who?
So,
Total Drama
Total
Island.
Drama
That's what I watch.
What is that?
It's Chris and McKelvey, I think's his name. It's a bunch of kids stuck on an island, camping.
Okay.
Is it like Love Island?
No, it's not like Love Island.
Does it have a rock?
Where is your mind, young lady? No, what's Total Drama Island? Maybe it'll be an Emmy candidate next year.
What it just shows, it's tough for any show with this much diffusion of
Exactly.
choices
Yeah.
to build an audience and build a zeitgeist. It's just not there anymore. I mean, the water cooler effect, not there.
I mean,
for the
Mary
most
Tyler
part.
Moore was there, but if you had Gunsmoke today, could it survive? Not a chance.
I don't know.
Oh, man, the Flintstones, still good.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Happy days, 50 years.
Running green on the screen
Tuesday,
right
8
now, the
o'clock.
VIX 17.44. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen, and this is ahead of key interest rate decisions from the U.S. to the U.K. and Japan. Now, following its best week of the year, the S&P 500 now down 0.2%, 11 points at 5,613. The Dow up 0.4%, 167 points, 41,568. The Nasdaq down 0.8%, 153 points at 17,531. We have the two-year yield at 3.57%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.66%, and that is little change. To currencies, the dollar down 0.4%. We have the Japanese yen stronger, up 0.2% at 140.46 against the dollar. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down more than 2.5% at around 58,000. Shares of Apple checking in over there, down about 3%. That analyst noted that demand for iPhone 16 Pro series lower than expected. And then you have Colgate-Palmolive. Shares down about 0.1%. It was downgraded at Wells Fargo to underweight from equal weight. And the stocks on the move, that would be eye care company Bausch & Lomb. They're up about 14%. Financial Times reporting it's exploring a sale. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Bausch & Lomb's been exploring a sale for, I think, 50 years.
Exactly.
Full disclosure, a family member was on the board at one point. So I've got a bias there. I got a whole
contact lens
heritage to
there.
Bausch. Yeah, before the contact lens, it was optics as well. Okay, what we're doing, folks, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I'm in shock, Paul, of how quickly the election's coming. I mean, we're on the edge of the British here.
Exactly.
And so we want to do, with our best, smartest people, like Jack Fitzpatrick, we want to do a focused, everyday thing, but we don't want to give you, I mean, I was going to, they were going to, what should the title be? And I was like, vote early, vote often.
Yeah, sure.
I thought that would be, that'd be good as an election trend. Instead, it's Surveillance Election 2024.
Love it.
Kicking it off from the Cronkite School, Arizona State. Jack Fitzpatrick joins us here. Brilliant on the Congress. Jack, is the outcome the first Wednesday of November gridlock?
Yes, very likely, and in fact, unusually so. If you look at any reasonably likely projections of what to expect from this election, the likelihood of some sort of divide is higher than you typically see with a new president coming in. We've got a recent history of a new president being elected with the trifecta, where their party controls the House and Senate. That is possible. It's particularly possible for Republicans if they have a good year, because the Senate map is very much in their favor. But given that the presidential race looks close, the House looks very close, and the Senate map benefits Republicans, the chances of Democrats winning something and Republicans winning something is very significant. Some sort of divide then makes it tough for the incoming president to really follow through on their legislative promises. So gridlock is a pretty fair expectation heading into January.
You held court at Arizona State, the Walter Cronkite School, which is hugely prestigious, folks. David Gura says Arizona matters. Jack Fitzpatrick, why is David Gura looking at Arizona?
It's solidly a swing state now. I mean, we've really seen a shift in the map where, Florida and Ohio have moved away from Democrats. They have not made their way into making a huge state like Texas competitive. And if you plot out the opportunities for a Democrat to win, it's not that it entirely hinges on Arizona. I would say Pennsylvania and Michigan are hugely important. But if you try to replicate what Biden did, you need Pennsylvania, you may need Arizona. And Arizona's looking better in the polls for Harris than Georgia has been a lot of the time. So if it's a competitive race, as the polls show us it is broadly, you really need to pick up a moderately large swing state, and Arizona seems to fit the bill. It's one of the more important states right now.
Jack, what can either campaign do to move the needle between now and Election Day? What should we be looking for? Because I don't think we're going to get any more debates. So what should we be looking for?
I don't know that either side has much of an opportunity to really significantly move the needle. The candidates are pretty well known. Trump is very well known. Harris is still in the process of introducing herself to voters, but she has consolidated a lot of Democratic support. It's more a matter of motivating turnout and trying to persuade the persuadable voters on the fringes. But that is an effort that's worthwhile for both campaigns because, again, it's a very close race. So even smaller events, as silly as it may seem, if Taylor Swift is encouraging people to register to vote and that pushes some younger voters to register. That can make a difference. Any little push that wouldn't necessarily make or break an election could make a significant difference when it's this close.
Okay, I'm going to pick, Jack, on a Colorado 8th Congressional District. You like how I'm doing
I
this,
saw
Paul?
that. How'd you do that?
Like, she's
Interweb.
amazing. You know, we got Yadira Caraveo. I know I'm butchering this. Gabe Evans. And it's just a classic pre-election question. Does the Democrat in the Colorado 8th toss-up, does the Republican in the Colorado 8th toss-up, do they want their presidential candidates to show up?
Probably. When I talk to members generally...
Jack, it's surveillance. We don't take probably as an answer.
Then I'm going to give you the strong yes. Okay. At least I can say people in competitive districts tend to want to motivate people to get out, and they understand that their races are subsumed by presidential politics. You hear from moderates who do kind of try to separate themselves from controversial statements by the head of their party, but at the same time, there's an understanding that the presidential race has kind of controlled the political narrative. They're not talking about totally separate issues in their races. It's a matter of, do you have the fundraising you need? Do you motivate your people to turn out? That maybe there will be one or two who disagree with that, but generally the competitive district members know that they are trying to chase the coattails as successfully as possible.
Paul, this district, the Colorado 8th, 48.4% to 47.7% last time around.
Yep.
Every district should be like that. They're not.
I don't know.
One more.
Jack, real quick, are we going to hear any talk of a debate between now and Election Day, or is that kind of tabled here?
It seems tabled at this point. If Trump wants it, then he would be the one to make the difference. Harris offered it. Trump did not perform very well, according to many people's opinions of that performance. If the person who is widely perceived to have lost and is less likely to benefit, or more likely to benefit to try to turn it around, doesn't want to take a mulligan and try again, then it's probably not going to happen. Harris has said she'll do it, but it doesn't seem like Trump is changing his mind.
Jack Fitzpatrick with a golf talk.
Yeah.
See that? It's pretty
Saw that.
impressive.
Yep.
Jack, thank you so much. Let's do this again. Part of our election 2024 coverage. I got vetoed. Sparta called me up. He said, you can't say, it's not, the election segment we're doing is not vote early, vote often.
Oh,
that didn't, that didn't go over.
That didn't go over well.
The consultant said no. Erickson, he's shaking his head.
Yeah.
In the control, you see, everyone in the control room lost money last week.
Oh,
I mean, on the NFL.
Yep.
Tito Jackson is dead at 70, and I guess that's what you have. But boy, I'll tell you, when the Jackson 5 broke, it was just like, I remember staring at the screen, going, "What is this? Who is this little kid?"
Yeah, amazing.
And just a huge part of our heritage is
Motown.
Well. So it was Motown, but it was different. It was right from the get-go. It was this totally different thing. And you talk about Shogun and all that. It's the way we were. Sunday evening.
Yep.
You did something Saturday night. You went to NBC Saturday night at the movies. All that. The Jackson 5, way back. I want you back. It's been a great Monday. The Fed on Wednesday. Good morning.